Chapter 504. In the era of the ancient gods, there were many magical things. The Rainbow Bridge was one of them. It could be used to teleport between planes. It was very powerful, but it disappeared later. "Where's Chris?" "Bring her there," Hathaway said as she calculated the coordinates. "I've already informed her." "She'll be here soon," Sulen said. After waiting for about 10 minutes, Chris hurried over. "What's the hurry?" After fighting for half the night, she was planning to sleep in and rest. However, Sulen sent someone to inform her that there was something important. "I just received a message from the embroidered uniform guard. They found someone summoning a demon in the southern provinces of Florence. According to speculation, it's at least a high-level demon. It might even be a legendary demon." "A legendary demon?" Chris was slightly stunned. She was now close to the legendary level and knew how destructive a legendary demon was. She also knew the demon's desire to destroy. If the legendary demon was allowed to move freely, the damage would be shocking. "Then we must hurry over," Chris said. "I've already asked Hathaway to prepare. We'll teleport directly when the time comes," Sulen said. With the help of the tower spirit, Hathaway quickly calculated the approximate coordinates of the southern Tabbats province. She then connected Milky Way to the elemental pool and activated the teleportation portal on the astrology platform. Soon, a powerful energy wave came and a teleportation portal appeared in front of them. Sulen nodded at Hathaway and took Chris directly into the portal. After passing through the portal, Sulen and Chris appeared in mid-air. To prevent the teleportation from reaching the bottom line, Hathaway set the coordinates at a high altitude, so the two were directly teleported into mid-air. Sulen had expected this. With a flash of light, the two floated in mid-air. Sulen looked around and soon saw a city about a dozen kilometers away from them. "Let's enter the city first. There should be a stronghold of the embroidered uniform guard in the city. Let them scout for information and find the demon," Sulen said. "Then let's go." The two of them weren't slow. After about 10 minutes, they appeared near the city. They didn't enter through the city gate. Sulen and the other man used invisibility to descend from the sky. The stronghold of the embroidered uniform guards was very hidden. However, they would report to the higher-ups after establishing a stronghold. Sulen had already checked the information before coming, so he naturally knew the location of the embroidered uniform guards. After observing for a while in the air, Sulen quickly found the location of the embroidered uniform guard's base. He then brought Chris directly to the embroidered uniform guard's base. "Who's there?" As Sulen and Roland removed their invisibility spell, the embroidered uniform guards in the stronghold immediately noticed them. "You're quite vigilant." Sulen nodded at the few Imperial secret guards who rushed over. "Your Majesty." After seeing Sulen's appearance clearly, one of the embroidered uniform guards turned pale with fright. Then, he reacted and prepared to salute. All right, there's no time for you to bow. Where's the information you've gathered about that demon? Report to me first." Sulen waved his hand and stopped them. The embroidered uniform guard hesitated for a moment before saying, "Your Majesty has just received news that the demon that appeared this time is very likely to be at the legendary level. Just yesterday, Night Hunter's team encountered that demon. If not for the timely arrival of the priests and paladins of the temple, they would have been completely wiped out. In the end, after paying a heavy price, the knights and the priests retreated." "Where is that demon now?" Sulen asked. "The latest news is that the demon went south after leaving Brent Castle. Since yesterday, priests and paladins of the temple have been constantly sending reinforcements. That demon hasn't caused much damage." The embroidered uniform guard quickly relayed the news. Sulen nodded, then said, "Who is familiar with the terrain here? Come with me. This legendary demon is a bomb in the material world. We have to get rid of him as soon as possible." "Kurud, come here." The embroidered uniform guard waved his hand. A young man with a thin and weak body and an ordinary appearance walked forward. However, his eyes were extremely lively. "Your Majesty, this is Kurud, a rogue. He's good at gathering information. He's very familiar with the terrain around Harvest City." "Yes, Your Majesty, I'm familiar with the surroundings," the skinny young man said with a fawning expression. "All right, it's you. We'll go now. You lead the way." Sulen didn't stop. With a flash of light, the three figures instantly disappeared. When they reappeared, they were already outside the city. Kurud was shocked when he saw the completely different scenery around him. He was even more in awe of His Majesty. "Kurud, what do you think we should do next?" Sulen looked around and asked. "Your Majesty, that demon went to a town in the south. We'll follow this road. After passing through 2 villages, we'll head west," Kurud said quickly. "All right, let's go." With a gentle wave of his hand, a gust of wind blew and lifted the 3 of them up. Then, they quickly flew into the distance. In order to deal with the demon and save magic power, Sulen used the power of the Wind Dragon Flag. Now, Sulen could completely control the Wind Dragon Flag. According to the grade, this Wind Dragon Flag was also a legendary creation. This legendary item was a group battle type. The lightning storm it came with could easily destroy an army. The attack range was very wide. Of course, this legendary item also had its shortcomings. If the attack range was large, the power would be reduced. The single target attack power was average. However, for Sulen, this wasn't a problem at all. He could deal with single target attacks by himself. If he really couldn't, he could summon Hathaway to attack from a distance. What he lacked was a large-scale attack spell. It was the skill to clear the field in the game. After the buff of Fly, the 3 of them were very fast. They didn't have to dodge or take a detour in the sky. So, under Kurud's guidance, the 3 of them quickly flew forward. Let's go back one day. In the southern plains, in a dark forest, a small group of mysterious people in black robes was moving forward quickly. They were strong and had cold faces. There was also some negative energy surrounding them. These mysterious people had smeared some special spices on their bodies. The mosquitoes and animals in the forest stayed away from them. Soon, this group of people arrived at an abandoned altar. "High Priest. Everyone is here," a black-robed person said respectfully. Soon, the crowd separated to the left and right. A figure covered in a cloak walked out. She reached out and took off her cloak. A curvaceous body appeared. The loose robe couldn't hide her charm. Her slender waist was tied with a white belt, forming an amazing arc. This woman's face was extremely beautiful. Her face was sharp, and her chin went down to her white neck. On the top of her head, there were 2 sharp protrusions that looked like a pair of small horns. She wore an extremely gorgeous and sexy priest robe under the cloak. The priest robe had a slit at the waist, revealing her beautiful white legs. But the people around her didn't dare to look. "That Brent has succeeded in summoning the demon?" "Yes, Your Excellency High Priest." "What's the reaction of the temple?" "The temple has sent priests and paladins to deal with it." The priestess nodded. "How's our manpower?" "It's all ready," a black-robed person said. Then, he hesitated. "Your Excellency High Priest, the demon summoned this time is a legendary demon. Our operation this time will be greatly affected." "Humph," the coquettish priestess snorted. "It's just a demon that likes to kill and destroy. With the temples dealing with him, he won't have time to pay attention to us. And a legendary demon will be even more powerful. As long as we succeed, I can immediately advance to legendary. Do it. When he's weakened, we'll immediately use the altar to seize his power." More than a dozen black-robed people scattered in all directions. It seemed like they were beginning to prepare. The priestess in the lead led the others to the area around the altar. While the others were busy, the priestess looked into the distance. In her eyes, there was a strange light. There was a desire, a sense of awe and fear. But soon, her eyes became determined. The elemental tide has begun. A new era has arrived. As the high priest of the Church of the Soul Snatchers, I must succeed this time. A group of temple knights was running quickly in the wilderness. The horses under them were already panting and sweating. But the knights had no intention of slowing down. Instead, they sped up and whipped their mounts. If this continued, the horses would be crippled. "Han, how far are we?" the knight in the lead asked. "Soon, it's in the small town ahead. We have to get there as soon as possible. This time, those rats summoned a legendary demon. We paid a great price to keep him here. Those damn rats. Don't let me catch them. Otherwise, I'll send them to the gallows." Knight Hunter was the one who found out about this. He tracked Baron Brent to his castle. By the time he broke in, that damned bastard had already completed the summoning ritual and sacrificed thousands of people to the summoning ritual. When this mission is over, I'll teach those nobles a lesson. Also, we have to keep an eye on the other nobles. We don't have to do anything. That king won't let them go. He's known for his ruthlessness. He's also very powerful. And it's said that he has a legendary wizard as his wife. Those nobles are going to be in trouble this time. The knight gloated. Chapter 505. Southern Plains, Blue Lake Town. Blue Lake Town was a famous wealthy town in the Southern Plains. The land was fertile, the climate was pleasant, and there was a large lake next to the town. The lake water was clear and sparkling, and it looked like a huge sapphire from afar. Hence the name Blue Lake, and the town was also called Blue Lake City. Because the town was located on the lakeside, there was plenty of water, and there was a bumper harvest every year. The Blue Lake was rich in fish, and the production of all kinds of aquatic products was high. The taxes of this town were comparable to a small city. But now, this famous town in the south had fallen into a sea of fire. In the center of the town, a tall demon covered in flames was wantonly destroying everything. Around him, more than a dozen warriors and priests were constantly attacking him. Divine spells fell from the sky onto the fiend's body, but the power of these divine spells was limited. Flame Whip. A flaming whip suddenly flew out and instantly entangled a temple knight. The priests and paladins around launched attacks one after another, trying to force the demon to dodge. However, the demon roared. "Order, intimidate." A strong light flashed from the demon, and then quickly swept across the battlefield. The people besieging the demon suddenly felt their minds go blank, and their bodies involuntarily stagnated for a moment. Taking advantage of the gap, the Baylor waved his arm, and the flame whip instantly tightened. He directly pulled the entangled warrior over, and with the other hand, he held a huge beheading sword and instantly slashed. Blood splattered everywhere, and with a scream, the temple paladin was cut in two by the beheading sword. After the fiend finished the beheading, he didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. He brandished the beheading sword and slashed at the nearest paladin. Holy impact. Purify evil. Protect evil. Rays of light flew out as the demon's attack pierced through the many magic barriers and continued to sweep towards the temple knight. The temple knight who was attacked swung his sword horizontally. Clang! The sound of metal clashing could be heard as he was sent flying and crashed into a nearby wall. Just as he was about to follow up with another attack, a dozen divine spells attacked him. Although none of the priests, temple knights, or paladins had reached the legendary rank, the demon's power was suppressed in the main material plane. He didn't want to face these attacks head-on, so he could only give up. Summon the devil. Evil light flickered as a powerful evil aura erupted from the demon's body. In the next second, several figures appeared out of thin air. It was the 4 Vrak demons. As soon as these Vraks appeared, they charged towards the temple knights. They were already having a hard time dealing with the Vraks, and with the addition of 4 Vraks, the situation became even more dangerous. At this critical moment, 4 rays of divine light descended from the sky and instantly hit the 4 flow demons. Expel! The messy sound of hooves could be heard as a dozen clerics rushed over, their faces covered in dust. Seeing that the situation was critical, he immediately cast a spell to provide support. As the 4 divine lights descended, the aggressive stone Vrak froze and began to fade away as the world rejected them. The Vrak struggled to stay in the prime material plane, but they couldn't resist the repulsive force and were sent back to the abyss in the blink of an eye. The slight advantage that they had just gained was instantly nullified. More importantly, the temple's reinforcements had arrived. The temple's members, who were barely holding on, had their strength doubled after the reinforcements arrived. What was even more precarious was that the situation had instantly stabilized. The battle was in a stalemate once again. A powerful evil force came from afar. Su Luan sensed this force from afar. This evil force full of death, slaughter, and chaos was constantly destroying the surroundings. The chaotic and intense energy fluctuations came from afar. Su Luan didn't directly use a transmission spell to go there. After putting Kuru down, he and Chrissy sped up and flew there. When Su Lan arrived at the battlefield, he found that the situation was out of his expectations. On the battlefield, a powerful Baylor was roaring in anger. The entire battlefield had turned into a sea of fire. The Baylor and the fire deity had some similarities. Their true forms were like monsters that were burning with raging flames all over their bodies. Their flesh and blood had been transformed into elements. Wherever the Baylor passed by, it would soon become dry land. Along the way, the Baylor left withered and cracked wounds on the ground. This was the damage and interference caused by its own power to the material plane. Where it invaded, the fertile land would become permanently barren, and the evil force would pollute the land. To put it bluntly, if it wasn't expelled or killed as soon as possible, it could completely turn the surrounding land into a dry and barren abyss. Baylor, legendary demon, large demon life, interdimensional creature, chaos, interdimensional, evil, divine creature, challenge rating, 21. A high-level demon from the abyss. He was very familiar with the evil, destruction, slaughter, and chaos aura. It was very similar to the evil gods and ancient abominations. The abyss was an extremely chaotic and evil place. There were many types of demons here. New species of demons were born almost every day. This was the embodiment of the evil and chaos of the multiverse. It was completely opposite to the good and orderly planes like Mountain Paradise. The original ruler of the abyss was the Orbis demons. These Orbis demons were born directly from the origin of chaos and destruction. They were also the first natives of the abyss. They were the descendants of the chaos demons and had once ruled the abyss for a long time. However, although these Orbis demons were powerful, their numbers were far less than the number of demons today. In the war with the Order Ancient Gods, the Orbis demons had always been suppressed. Until one day, the Orbis demons discovered humans. Before the order of the multiverse was perfected, many lost human souls would enter the abyss. The Orbis demons were very interested in human souls. So they used their chaotic power to transform these souls and finally created the second generation of demons, the Tana Re demons. However, compared to the Orbis demons, the Tana Re demons were weak. The Orbis demons used these Tana Re demons as cannon fodder and slaves. However, as time passed, the number of Tana Re demons increased, and their strength gradually increased. In the end, the Tana Re demons killed the Orbis demons and became the new rulers of the abyss. Now, many demon lords in the abyss were also Tana Re demons. The Baylor demons were the strongest of the Tana Ri demons. They inherited the power of chaos and fire. Even in the abyss, the Baylor demons were second only to the demon lords. They were also one of the few high-level demons born with divinity. This monster was one of the most powerful demons in the abyss. If they were in the abyss, with the bonus of the abyss power, their challenge rating would reach level 26. If it were not for the suppression of energy and the suppression of the power of the plane, this Baylor demon would have killed all the temple knights, priests, and paladins. In the ruins, there was a huge monster that was burning with raging flames. It had a pair of demon horns and a pair of wide demon wings on its back. However, it was basically useless in this narrow underground ruin. The Baylor demon was more than 12 feet tall and weighed more than 5,000 pounds. It held a huge abyssal beheading sword in its hand, which was burning with flames. The Baylor demon was also a high-level demon that could fight with 2 weapons. Its other weapon was the level +3 abyssal flame whip. However, at this time, the Baylor demon did not seem to be having a good time. There were more than 20 clerics attacking it. At the same time, these clerics cooperated with each other and used their energy to form pale golden chains that wrapped around the Baylor demon. These chains wrapped around the Baylor demon's arms, wings, and legs. Under the Baylor demon's struggle, the chains kept breaking, but soon, new chains were condensed. The clerics wanted to forcibly seal the Baylor demon. The clerics looked miserable. Many of them had burns on their bodies. Compared to the Baylor demon, these clerics looked exhausted. If they continued to fight, they would be in danger. Seeing this, Sulan did not continue to watch. Powerful thunder energy gushed out of his body, and the storm halberd surrounded by endless thunder energy appeared in his hand. Damn mortals! The Baylor demon roared, and the pale golden chains that bound its body instantly tightened. The flames on the Baylor demon's body burst out in an instant. A powerful evil energy swept across, and the originally tight golden chains collapsed under this power. Seeing the collapsed chains, the clerics' faces changed drastically. They wanted to bind the Baylor demon again, but these clerics who were almost out of energy had no time to repair the chains. A flaming whip more than 10 meters long swept towards them with a whistling wind. The exhausted clergy were unable to resist and were about to be killed. At this time, there was a thunderclap in the sky. Dazzling lightning flashed, and a figure wrapped in countless lightning bolts appeared in the path of the flame whip. Su Luan had no intention of dodging, and directly brandished the storm halberd to hack at the flame whip. Pale blue lightning appeared. The flame whip was directly knocked away. The power of the flame on it dimmed instantly and then gradually extinguished. Chapter 506. The Baylor flicked its wrist and put away the flame whip. Its eyes were fixed on Sulan. It was very cautious of Sulan's sudden appearance. A demigod from the material plane? No, you're a human. The Baylor felt the divine power on Sulan's body, and there was a look of greed in its eyes. Divinity was very important to them. If they wanted to become a demon lord, they couldn't do without it. Originally, the Baylor came to the roof of the material plane to plunder a batch of souls and flesh. It didn't expect to meet a human with divinity. This was a delicious meal delivered to its door. In the previous confrontation, neither side used their full strength. It could only be regarded as a test. The Baylor in front of him wanted to snatch Sulan's divinity, but Sulan also wanted to snatch his divinity. Sulan would never complain about having too much divinity. Although the Baylor was suppressed by the power of the plane, its challenge level was as high as 21. If the paladins, priests, and paladins did not rely on divine power to suppress it, they would have been wiped out long ago. But even so, they had paid a heavy price. More than half of them were killed or injured. However, although the Baylor's strength was not bad, it was still far from Sulan's. If it was in the abyss, the Baylor could use its full strength to fight a few rounds with Sulan. Now that it was in the material plane, it was even less of a match. However, to prevent the Baylor from discovering Sullen's true strength and escaping back to the abyss, Su Lin still had to hide his strength. He would give the Baylor a surprise after it had completely sealed the surrounding space. Baylor. Since you're here, stay. Get out of the way. This is not a battle you can interfere in. Su Lin said to the clerics. Whoosh. A strong gust of wind came, and the flame whips came with endless flames. The characteristics of demons made them naturally irritable and impatient. After seeing the divinity on Su Luan's body, they directly attacked and made up their minds to rob Su Luan's divinity. Crack! With a thunderous sound, the storm halberd blocked the flame whip. However, just as Su Lin blocked the flame whip, the Baylor's other hand swung the giant beheading sword at Su Lin fiercely. A shrill sound of wind was heard as the huge beheading sword slashed towards Su Luan with scorching flames. The heat it carried could melt steel. Su Luan's figure flashed, and he instantly dodged this attack. Boom! There was a loud sound, and the place where Su Lin had been standing just a moment ago became a big pit with flames. Fire! Just as it dodged the attack, the Baylor suddenly revealed a sinister smile. Mind control. The Baylor's, the Baylors's, and his. There was an inexplicable whisper in Sullen's heart, and an evil force attacked his brain. However, as soon as it appeared, Su Lin directly drove it out. Sullen's will was easily immune to this attack. Without being affected at all, Su Lin turned over and landed on the ground. The Baylor's expression seemed to be a little incredulous. After seeing that Su Lin was not affected, it became even angrier. It roared and swung the beheading sword again. Bang! There was a loud sound of metal clashing. Sullen's storm halberd swept and easily blocked the beheading sword. Su Lin did not just take a beating without fighting back. After blocking the beheading sword, Sullen's arm waved, and the storm halberd drew a circle and quickly slashed at the Baylor's head. The sharp halberd blade carried endless lightning, causing the Baylor's body to feel a slight sting. Thunder cut. The dazzling lightning instantly slashed. The Baylor's body turned, and the beheading sword in its hand was thrown. Dang! The lightning flashed, and the powerful force swung the beheading sword. Sullen's wrist turned, and the storm halberd quickly slashed again. Dang! Dang! Continuous collision sounded, and the tall Baylor was beaten back by Su Lin. The Baylor felt the power from the beheading sword and looked at Su Lin in shock. The human in front of it was actually stronger than it. After realizing that it could not take advantage of Su Lin, the Baylor's body flashed, and it wanted to use spell-like power to get rid of Su Lin. Space imprisonment. Su Lin released the spell that he had been preparing for a long time. The space was instantly locked, and the teleportation spell lost its effect. The teleportation light on the Baylor's body dissipated before it could rise. Su Lin sneered. He came here to kill this Baylor. How could he give it a chance to escape? The Baylor's face was filled with disbelief. It flapped its wings, trying to get away. At the same time, it released several spells toward Su Lin. Law, Intimidate. Evil Aura. Blasphemy. Continuous aura flashed from the Baylor's body, but whether it was Law, Intimidate or Evil Aura, they quickly dissipated after touching Su Lin. Su Lin was directly immune to these two spells. The Baylor's mouth quickly uttered ancient blasphemy. This evil language had powerful magic, and the surrounding air was filled with evil power. Su Lin suddenly felt a sharp pain in his body, causing his body to involuntarily twist. Seeing the effect of the spell, the flames in the Baylor's eyes rose, and it rushed towards Su Lin in the next second. The beheading greatsword in its hand slashed towards him with a shrill sound, as if it wanted to cut Su Lin in two. Thunder Domain. Dazzling lightning burst out from Sullen's body, and the endless power of thunder and lightning filled the space around him. The evil power in his body was instantly purified. Seeing the Baler rushing toward him, Sullen's body flashed, and he directly rushed toward it. Bang! The lightning and flames collided, and the loud roar shook the ears of the people around. The Baler couldn't help but take a step back. The lightning on Sullen's body skyrocketed, and a thundercloud appeared in the sky. Countless lightning flashed in the thundercloud. With Sullen's attack, a bolt of lightning fell from the sky and hit the storm battle halberd in his hand. The weapon that was originally surrounded by lightning seemed to have completely turned into a bolt of lightning at this moment. Streaks of light quickly lit up one after another. Greater haste. Dragon strength. Greater bear's tenacity. Expose weakness. Greater fox's cunning. Greater eagle's glory. All troops, cheer. With more than a dozen spells on his body, Sulen waved the storm battle halberd and directly slashed toward the Baler's waist. Clang, clang, clang. The Baler waved its huge sword like a windmill, constantly blocking. However, after every block, its tall figure would take a step back. The flames on its body continued to rise, and its face became more and more angry. Under a series of attacks, the Baler's body retreated more than a dozen meters, and there were a lot of wounds on its body. Even the hand holding the beheading sword trembled slightly, and lightning constantly flashed on its body. Thunder's fury. The lightning in the sky gathered in Sullen's hand, and an amazing energy burst out in an instant. Sullen's body appeared beside the Baler in an instant, and then the storm battle halberd with the power of thunder fiercely slashed toward the Baler. The Baler, who had just recovered, felt the amazing power on the storm battle halberd, and a chill rose in its heart. A sense of crisis appeared in its mind. Without hesitation, the Baler held the beheading sword in one hand and the sword in the other hand to block in front of it. Rumble. The violent impact resounded through the earth. The Baler's tall body flew out directly. With a bang, it completely destroyed a burning house. The beheading sword in its hand was hit dozens of meters away, and a deep scar appeared on the beheading sword. Blood splattered, and a deep wound appeared on the Baler's chest. Demon blood gushed out. The blood was like gasoline, and it immediately burned when it fell to the ground. Just as Sulen and the Baler were fighting, in a forest not far from this battlefield, a group of black-robed people were busy quickly. This is a godsend opportunity. The Baler is dying. Get ready. The beautiful woman's eyes flashed with surprise. Your Excellency, what about the human? He is too strong, and it is likely to affect our plan. A black-robed man next to her reminded. He is the king of the kingdom of Florence. Don't worry about him. As long as we successfully seize the power of the Baler, he is nothing to be afraid of. The high priest shook his head and said, Your Excellency, it is still too risky to do it now. The black-robed man next to her said, Risk? What is not risky to do? How long have we been preparing? It has been decades. This is the best opportunity. If we miss it, we may not have such a chance again. The high priest suddenly turned around, and his gorgeous expression became cold and ruthless. A flash of ruthlessness flashed in his eyes. Act now. The high priest said coldly. Yes. The black-robed people around him were shocked. They did not dare to look at him and quickly lowered their heads. Soon, these black-robed people finished their preparations. At the same time, the Baler was just sent flying by Sulen. The high priest's eyes were cold, and he directly ordered, Do it. With the order, a flash of light instantly rose from the runic circle. The next second, the flash of light rushed into the sky, crossed a distance of thousands of meters, and instantly hit the Baler on the ground. The Baler, who was about to get up, suddenly froze, and then he struggled frantically. At this time, the high priest also stood on a runic circle. A strange flash of light rose and flew directly toward the Baler. Chapter 507. Sulen was dumbfounded. Just now, when he was about to kill the bailer in front of him, a flash of light fell from the sky and turned into silver chains that trapped the bailer. Before he could recover, another red light descended. The bailer struggled to break free from the shackles. The silver chain was constantly broken, but it would recover in the next second. The red light fell, and the power of the bailer was quickly extracted. *T, someone wants to kill me. Seeing the red light, Sulen's first reaction was to kill the bailer. Just as he was about to do it, he suddenly realized that something was wrong. The red light was seizing the power of the bailer. This situation suddenly reminded him of an organization, the Church of the Soul Snatchers. The Soul Snatcher Church was also an evil cult. However, this cult was very different from other evil cults. The fallen and the followers of evil gods sacrificed evil gods and demons in exchange for power. However, although the Soul Snatcher Church also sacrificed evil gods and demons, their goal wasn't the power bestowed by evil gods. Their goal was to seize all the power owned by the evil gods or demons. Compared to the evil gods, these people of the Church of the Soul Snatchers were crazier. Usually, they would disguise themselves as fallen or evil gods and lure ordinary people to fall and make them believe in evil gods or demons. They were hidden in the dark, but they were constantly making small moves in the dark. The origin of the Church of the Soul Snatchers was said to date back to the era before the Arcane Empire. Some arcanists wanted to seize the power of the gods and developed various methods. Later, a great arcanist invented the spell of ascension. Later, he tried to become a god, but he was directly blown up by the divine power and all kinds of information. After this incident, many arcanists gave up on researching ways to seize the power of the gods. However, there were also some who believed that the reason why the investiture of the gods failed was because the human body could not withstand so much divine power. Those people wanted to increase the strength of the human body so that the human body could contain more divine power. However, they soon discovered that there was a limit to the improvement of the physical body, and the further they improved, the more difficult it became. Moreover, even if they improved to the limit, the human body could not contain the power of so many gods. Later on, some people proposed to seize the power of evil gods or demons. Later on, because of some turmoil, this sect disappeared. Of course, it was said that they had disappeared without a trace. In fact, these people had just hidden themselves even deeper. Spirit snatching had succeeded in history, but the side effects were huge. Evil gods and demons were different from humans. They had a strong negative energy. Many times, they would directly degenerate into evil gods or demons. Sulen knew about this cult because he had found it in Hathaway's library some time ago. Sulen did not know how the Soul Snatcher Church had managed to steal the bailer's power, but he figured it had something to do with the sacrifices they had made. The bailer was probably the work of the Soul Snatcher Church. A cold light flashed in Sulen's eyes. These people dared to steal the Soul Snatcher Church's power. Chris. Sulen called the little succubus through the telepathic link. Master, I'm here. Chris's voice came. Come with me to take care of those guys who are here to take advantage of the situation. It didn't take long for Sulen to find the location of those people on the map. His figure flashed and appeared beside Chrissy. Although Sulen was furious that the Soul Snatchers had come to steal his kill, it was also an opportunity. Perhaps he could get a lot of benefits this time. Let's go. Sulen grabbed Chris's hand, and a flash of light rose from them. The next second, the two of them appeared above a runic circle. Who is it? The energy fluctuations of the teleportation spell immediately alerted the Soul Snatchers below. They immediately shouted when Sulen and Chris appeared. Sulen ignored them and turned his head to look at the coquettish priestess who was standing in another rune circle and preparing to absorb the power of the bailer. This power is familiar. This is the power of a demon. As expected, the demon's descent this time is caused by you Soul Snatchers. Su Len immediately sensed the aura of these people. A cold light flashed in his eyes. Group charm. The soul snatchers who were about to attack suddenly froze. They then looked at Chris with mesmerized eyes. Evil spirit. Blasphemous word. At that moment, two evil forces appeared in an instant. Lightning flashed on Sullen's body, dispelling the evil force field around him. The priestess that had been standing in the other runic array also disappeared. Hathaway's group charm hadn't been able to control her. A dark shadow suddenly flew over. Su Luan's figure disappeared in an instant, and then appeared near the priestess. Ambush. Eat my spear. The dazzling lightning suddenly released a powerful force and pierced through the priestess' body. Endless lightning exploded from her body. The priestess' body stiffened. The negative energy in her body was instantly purified by the lightning. Countless indistinct evil spirits entangled together flew out of her body. At the same time, her beautiful face quickly aged. Her body quickly lost water and life force. In just a few seconds, she turned into an old woman with dry and coarse skin and an old face. This was her original appearance. Her previous appearance was just a forced transformation with the help of magic. After the evil energy in her body was purified, she instantly returned to her original appearance. After losing her magic and being severely injured, her life came to an end. Her body tilted and fell to the ground. Chris, quickly. Su Len put away his storm war halberd and pulled Chris to the altar where the priestess had been standing. Quickly stand there and absorb the power. Su Len said, pointing at the runic circle. Okay. Chris naturally saw the energy contained in it. Without hesitation, her body flashed and instantly stood on it. By the way, order the disciples of the soul snatchers to cast spells with all their might and trap the Baler. Chris could no longer speak at this time. She could only nod to show that she understood and absorbed the power of the Baler with all her might. Balers and succubi were both Tana Uri demons. Although they had chosen different directions during the evolution process, their energy was essentially the same. The energy of the Baler might be a drug to humans. Absorbing it would turn a human into a demon, but it was a good tonic for demons. Chris absorbed the energy of the Baler without any discomfort at all. Su Len did not stay there. With a flash of light, he appeared near the Baler again. At this time, the Baler looked a little miserable. In the battle just now, it was injured by Su Len and then ambushed by the soul snatchers. Countless chains wrapped around it, making it unable to break free. Now, the energy in its body was constantly being extracted. If this continued, it would be the time of its death when all the energy in its body was taken away. However, the chains had suddenly broken, allowing the Baler to grab them a few times. In order to survive, the Baler erupted with a strong will to live. It grabbed the many chains wrapped around its body and tried to tear them all apart, but at that moment, a playful voice came from the sky. Still want to run? In the next second, Sullen's figure instantly rushed down, the storm war halberd in his hand sweeping over with boundless lightning, knocking the Baler back. In order to let Chris absorb the energy of the Baler, Su Len did not kill it. With Su Len blocking it, the Baler had lost all hope of escaping. Under the extraction of the soul-snatching circle, its energy was constantly being absorbed. With Sullen's protection, the soul-snatching circle operated quickly, constantly extracting the energy of the Baler and sending it into Chris's body. As the energy absorbed increased, Chris's aura became stronger and stronger. She was originally a Class 4 elite succubus, but now, she quickly reached the peak. A lot of energy was needed to break through to the legend rank, but it was not a problem for Chris at all. A legend rank Baler was more than enough for her to advance. Soon, more and more energy was extracted. As the Baler's energy decreased, the soul-snatching circle's energy absorption speed also increased. Finally, a powerful energy was extracted, and the flames on the Baler's body disappeared. Its original legend rank aura also completely dissipated. At the same time, Chris's stagnant aura began to rise again. This time, she directly broke through the shackles of the legend rank and became a legend rank demon. After becoming a legend rank demon, Chris's strength did not stop. Instead, it continued to increase, but the speed of increase became even slower. Finally, the energy of the Baler was completely drained by the soul-snatching circle, and Chris absorbed all the energy. After losing all its energy, the Baler's life came to an end. The countless silver chains that originally bound it turned into specks of light at this moment, and the Baler was blown by the wind and turned into a pile of ashes, leaving only the beheading sword and flame whip. A breeze blew, and the beheading sword and flame whip flew directly into Sullen's hands. As a legend rank demon, the weapons used by the Baler were naturally not ordinary. The main material of the beheading sword was abyss magic steel, while the flame whip was made of abyss magic steel mixed with the tendons of the abyssal fire lizard. Although the two items were not legend rank, the materials were very good. The main reason was that the abyssal demon's craftsmanship was too rough. If these things were given to Hathaway, together with some other materials, it would not be difficult for them to become legend rank equipment. It just so happened that Chris still lacked a weapon to advance to legend rank. Chapter 508. With the death of the Baler, the chaos had come to an end. However, there was still a lot of work to be done. Blue Lake Town had been destroyed, and it needed to be rebuilt. Other than the residents who had been killed by the Baler, many had escaped to the surrounding wilderness. The town needed to be rebuilt, and the refugees needed to be settled as soon as possible. At the same time, because of the destruction of the Baler, a large part of the farmland here was destroyed and needed to be replanted in time. The destroyed farmland also needed to be purified of evil energy. There were a lot of things to do. In addition to these, Sulen also had to summon the paladins and give them rewards. After all, when the Baler was raging, these people helped stop him and reduced Florence's losses. As soon as the battle was over, Sulen found these people. At this time, there were less than 20 paladins left, and all of them were injured. After Sulen came here, he directly used physical healing to treat these people's injuries. The effect of physical healing was very good. Except for a few who were seriously injured, the injuries of the others were almost healed. Even the rest were fine. Sulen expressed his gratitude to these paladins and priests and promised to give rewards. The rewards for those who died in the battle would be doubled. Then he found a relatively intact house in Blue Lake Town for them to live in. Among these paladins, except for 2 who had recovered and went back to report to the paladin, the others lived here for the time being. After arranging these people, Sulen went to check on Chrissy. Chrissy, who had just completed her advancement, had not yet controlled her power. Through the spirit-devouring array, she could at most seize about 80% of the energy. Chrissy had 80% of the Baler's power. Not only the power, but also the divinity of the Baler. Divinity was different from other energies. Chrissy did not directly absorb it now. There were still a lot of residual consciousness of the Baler on it. If she absorbed it directly, it was very likely that the Baler would take the opportunity to resurrect. This kind of thing was not unprecedented. In the multiverse, many gods had been resurrected through various methods. Chrissy was not a legendary demon before. Once she engaged in a battle of wills, the consequences would be very dangerous, so the best way was to temporarily seal this divinity. After she fully adapted to her own energy, she would try to absorb it slowly. The Baler had a total of 7 points of divinity. If he had a little more, he would have been able to advance to a demon lord. But now, all of this divinity had been obtained by Chris. Sulen took out a magic staff and used the power of thunder to seal all the divinity of the Baler in one place. Endless power of thunder entered Chrissy's body and then continuously squeezed the divinity of the Baler. This process was very painful, and the taste of thunder and lightning was not pleasant. However, the little succubus often enjoyed the treatment of plasma cannons, so her resistance to thunder and lightning had obviously increased. In addition, Sullen's lightning was not an attack. Although it was uncomfortable, it was still bearable. Soon, the Baler's divinity was all squeezed into one place. Then, a dozen lightning chains separated from Sullen's body and completely sealed the divinity. With a flash of lightning, a lightning rune appeared on Chris's arm. After all, the power seized by the spirit-devouring circle was not from her own cultivation. It would take some time to digest and master it. At the same time, the Baler's power had a lot of negative will, which Chris had to remove by herself. After Chris completed her advancement, Sulen looked around at the people of the Church of Soul Snatchers. These people were still under Chris's control. The charm of a legendary succubus was very powerful. Sulen did not plan to kill these people for the time being. They might be useful in the future. He ordered these people to pack up and then let them return to Harvest City to wait for orders. After checking that there were no fish that had escaped the net, Sulen left with Chris. After returning to Harvest City, Sulen asked the Imperial Guard to pass on his orders and then directed the City Hall to start the post-disaster reconstruction work. This time, the Baler's energy was sucked out by the spirit-devouring circle. Sulen did not get any experience, legendary skill points, or soul crystals from it. In the end, he only got a gold treasure chest and some experience from the people of the Church of Soul Snatchers. If Chris did not successfully become a legendary, it would be a big loss. Without the Baler's interference, the post-disaster reconstruction work went very smoothly. The nobles around all contributed money and manpower. The news of Sullen's appearance was heard by the nobles the next day. Some of them wanted to curry favor with Sulen, but they did not dare to neglect his orders. The first batch of supplies was quickly prepared. Then, Sulen notified Sanfelto City and asked Phyllis to send some officials over. At the same time, he also began to settle the score for the Baler incident. This time, it was not just Baron Brent who was involved, but he was the most unlucky one. With his strength alone, there was no way for him to carry out such a legendary demon summoning ritual. Of course, the Church of the Soul Reaver was involved in this, but many of the nobles around Harvest City were also involved. During this time, Su Luan had ordered the Imperial Secret Service to collect all kinds of information. Although the Imperial Secret Service was not good at war, they were experts at collecting information. The nobles thought that they were doing things secretly, but in reality, the Imperial Secret Service had already investigated everything. After the investigation was completed, the people from Sanfelto City arrived and began to investigate the nobles. With the help of this demon incident, Sulen began to make a move on the nobles in the southern plains. After the last rebellion, Sulen wanted to clean up the area. However, considering that the nobles in the southern plains were already frightened at the time, if he was too aggressive, the nobles would very likely submit to the surrounding countries. At that time, it was very likely that the civil war would escalate into a war between Florence and several other countries. At that time, even if Sulen won, the southern provinces of the kingdom would be completely destroyed. Even the northern provinces that had just settled down would be in chaos again, so Sulen did not think too much about it. Now, with the demon incident caused by Baron Brent, it gave him a very good excuse. Of course, this incident was more to weaken the local noble's strength and increase his control over the south. Sulen currently lacked a large number of experienced grassroots officials. Although the academy in Sanfelto City had been training them, there was still a shortage of manpower. It would take at least 3 months for the basic officers to be trained. After that, they would need to go to prison for political studies. Only after passing all of that could they take up their posts. Many of these people were former members of the aristocracy. After all, in this era, the literacy rate of the aristocracy was the highest. Ordinary people could not even write their own names. Sulen was very clear about the morals of these nobles. All kinds of corruption, bending the law for personal gain, there was nothing they did not dare to do. However, at this time, they could not be used. Therefore, Sulen stipulated that those who had not gone through political studies in prison were not qualified to work in the council hall. They were not even allowed to be grassroots officials. There was a lot of food in Harvest City, so there was no pressure to use it to provide relief to the victims. This time, because of the Baylor's arrival, at least a dozen villages were destroyed, and 3 towns were severely damaged. Although the death toll had not been calculated, it was estimated to be 5,000 to 6,000 people. The number of people who escaped into the wild was estimated to be more than twice the number of people who died. If so many people were only given food, it would be a complete waste. Moreover, they had nothing to do, so it was easy for them to become a social danger. They would lose their jobs, lose their property, and have nothing to do. If the nobles were in charge, the crime rate here would skyrocket, and even more serious things would happen. Sulen planned to use the method of providing relief with work. This method had been proven very effective in his previous life. It just so happened that Harvest City had not been renovated yet. The city was dirty and messy, and the demons had destroyed a lot of farmland, so these people were needed to repair it. Of course, although the method of providing relief with work was good, it also had some disadvantages. That was, it consumed a lot of resources and money. Fortunately, Harvest City had enough food, so there was no need to worry. As for money, Sulen planned to replace it with farmland. This time, many people had died, so a lot of land had become ownerless. Sulen planned to give these lands to the victims as a reward. At the same time, many nobles had died in this incident, so their property was not a small amount. It was just right to use it as a reward. Basically, Sulen did not need to pay extra money to complete the renovation of Harvest City and the restoration of the destroyed towns. In order to repair the land destroyed by the Baylor demon, Sulen found the Church of Harvest City. The priests of the Church of the Goddess of Nature were willing to help Sulen purify the polluted land and make it fertile again. In exchange, Sulen had to pay a price. Money was the most basic. Sulen expressed his support for them to develop their faith among the victims. After every disaster, the souls of the survivors would be greatly damaged. This was a very good time to develop their faith. They could easily gain a lot of believers, and many of these believers would become devout believers, which was very important for a church. Of course, the other churches would not let go of this opportunity. Sulen would not stop them, nor would he support them. After all, a single church was not a good thing. But even so, the Church of the Goddess of Nature had a big advantage. Baylors and fire elemental elders were not popular in the material world. The main reason was that the land they passed through would become dry and barren. If it was a fire deity or a fire elemental lord, the consequences would be even worse. The best way was to use water elemental magic and the power of nature to repair it. Of course, wizards also had ways to do it, but the effect was not as good as others. P.S. Thank you book friends God_state, Little Newbie, Dimension Stone, and other book friends for their tips. Thank you to Rotson for the 1500 coins tip. Chapter 509. Harvest City had always been known as a rich city in the southern provinces. After the order was given, Sulen quickly gathered enough food. With enough food, the relief work could begin. Sulen had already sent people to set up temporary camps outside the city for the refugees to live in. All the refugees were organized into groups of 100 people. At the same time, the soldiers in Harvest City were sent to maintain law and order. A large number of people gathered together would cause a lot of problems. The most important thing was epidemic prevention. The number of casualties had already reached 5,000, and many of the corpses were not buried in time. In order to prevent the epidemic, Sulen had initiated a sanitation and epidemic prevention measure. In this era, disinfection methods were limited. Su Len could only use lime water to clean up. All the camps, including the city, were sprayed with lime water. At the same time, all the refugees were required to take a bath and disinfect their clothes. For Su Len's requirements, both the nobles and the civilians didn't understand. However, rumors about Su Len's obsession with cleanliness quickly spread. In addition to the refugees, Su Len also had strict requirements for the residents of Harvest City. No one was allowed to dump garbage anywhere. All garbage had to be sent to the garbage disposal station on every street. At the same time, the slums in Harvest City began to be demolished. Originally, Su Len wanted to see if anyone would take the initiative to jump out and make an example out of them. However, in the end, those gangsters cooperated with Su Len's orders without any intention of going against him. For those gangs, Su Len's deterrence was terrifyingly high. Since he began the urban transformation plan in Sanfilto City, more than a dozen cities had been transformed during this period. Many of the gangs wanted to resist, but they were all suppressed without exception. All the leaders were beheaded directly, and the rest were punished to become slaves and perform various kinds of labor. Those gangsters were already scared by his cruel methods. When they heard that Su Len wanted to reorganize the city, they immediately took the initiative to cooperate. They were afraid that if they were a step slower, they would be beheaded. At the same time, under Su Len's oppressive rule, rumors about him were everywhere. Some said that he liked to eat human flesh, especially women and children. The evidence was that Su Len's caravans would buy a large number of female slaves and children. In fact, this was to balance the population of North City. Some said that Su Len was favored by the devil, so he could build a city in the wasteland in just a few years. Some said that he had signed a contract with an evil dragon, and the dragon gave him power, allowing him to command a large number of flying dragons. The flying dragons in North City was the evidence. Anyway, these rumors were demonizing him and North City. After the barbarians appeared in North City, there were rumors that there were a large number of lunatics and gays in North City. Su Len didn't know how they came to this conclusion. After the drows appeared, many people with bad intentions swore that Su Len had a huge harem. It was full of seductive female drows. Every day, he had to sleep with 10 women at night before he could fall asleep. He also enslaved a large number of half-elves. There were countless half-elven beauties in his palace for him to mess around with. Su Len completely scoffed at this statement. These people were obviously talking nonsense. Harem? 10 women at night? These didn't exist at all. How many people did he have in his harem? And what about having 10 women in a night? At most, he only had 6 women, okay? Then where were the extra 4 women? You'd better make it up to me. Or I'll sue you for slander. Su Len sternly denied these rumors, but unfortunately, the effect was limited. The slums in Harvest City had been demolished, and the area needed to be reorganized. At the same time, the slums were hired again to work. Su Len felt that the number of refugees outside the city was not enough. With the addition of the slums, the surrounding projects could start. It was not easy to manage these people. There were not many qualified officials in Harvest City, and the ones in Sanfilto City were not enough. Su Len was having a headache finding some managers. Master, I have a way to solve your current problem. Just when Su Len was having a headache, Chris hugged Su Len from the side and said. The pair of bulges in front of her chest were tightly pressed against his body, which felt like a heavy weight on a human breast. What way? Su Len forced his attention away from his back and said with a hoarse voice. You know the followers of the Church of the Soul Snatchers under my command, right? Crazy's delicate red lips were close to Su Len's ear, and her breath was like orchids. I know, what about them? Her breath tickled his ear, and he couldn't help but move a little. Seeing Su Len's little movement, Crazy's beautiful big eyes rolled. She stuck out her small little tongue and licked his earlobe. Then she said, the followers of the Church of the Soul Snatchers are literate, and they're quite knowledgeable. They're definitely qualified to be basic managers. Now that they're following my orders, Master, you can let them manage the refugees. Su Len suddenly felt a warm feeling in his ear, and a ball of fire rose in his heart. The soul snatchers? Don't turn the refugees into evil cultists. Don't worry, I'm here. They'll listen to me. Crazy raised her little head proudly. All right, I'll leave it to you. Su Len nodded and agreed. But what? Crazy hugged Sullen's neck and put her little head on his shoulder. Su Len suddenly stood up, stretched out his arms, and stuffed the little succubus into his arms. But you'll have to help me vent my anger first. As he said that, he carried the little succubus into the room next door. With the help of Crazy's soul reapers, the relief work outside of Harvest City had officially begun. A large number of disaster victims were sent to different places to work. Soon, the disaster victims outside of Harvest City were redistributed. The ruins of the destroyed town were cleaned up, and a new city was built on the spot. The poor were also organized. A large number of fields outside the city were destroyed, and the poor were sent to replant seeds. The land that was destroyed by the Balers was slowly repaired with the help of the priests of the goddess of nature. One had to admit that the soul snatchers under Crazy's command were very capable. The tasks that Su Len assigned were all completed. After some observation, Su Len found that these people were not only good, but also more knowledgeable than the nobles. The education they received was also very good. Even the evil cultists had such high standards these days. After the relief work was on the right track, Su Len began to deal with the nobles. This time, Baron Brent's problem was very serious. Su Len didn't trust the nobles. They were like ticking time bombs, and no one knew when they would explode. Next, Su Len carried out a mandatory inspection of the nobles according to the information given by the Imperial Secret Service. It was easy to find a lot of people who were in cahoots with the Fallen and the Evil God's followers. The Evil God's followers and the Fallen loved to deal with the nobles. Although most of these nobles' ancestors were heroes, after hundreds and thousands of years of reproduction, a large number of nobles had long fallen. The dark side of the city was basically deliberately indulged by these nobles. The various gangs were actually the nobles' black gloves, responsible for dealing with some things that were inconvenient for the nobles to deal with. These were basically the unspoken rules of the nobles. Many nobles lived an extravagant and luxurious life. After enjoying all kinds of luxuries, they began to pursue more exciting things. Many evil cultists used this as an excuse to lure the nobles. There were also some nobles who wanted to obtain great power, extend their lives, or restore their youth. These nobles were full and had begun to pursue pleasure. This was also why so many nobles cooperated with the evil cultists and gave them protection. These foolish nobles even naively thought that the evil cultists could only rely on them and be at their mercy. Little did they know that in the eyes of the evil cultists, these nobles were the real fools. After a search by Su Len, a large number of nobles were quickly caught. However, most of the evil cultists and fallen ones behind these nobles escaped. Even the main members were not caught. For those foolish nobles, Su Len directly physically destroyed them and sent the rest of the family members to the northern wasteland. These nobles had reproduced for dozens of generations, hundreds of thousands of years. If they were all killed, the other nobles would feel sorry for them. If they were spared, they would rise again in a few years. Therefore, Su Len directly uprooted them and sent them all to the northern wasteland. The northern wasteland was thousands of miles away from here, and it was desolate and uninhabited. The construction of the new city required a lot of manpower. They did not know anyone in the Duchy of Beifeng, so the connections of these nobles were directly destroyed. Compared to the poor, many of these nobles were educated. After some political reform, they could even be used as grassroots officials. A noble family had at least a few dozen people, and at most a few hundred people. In the past, these people would gather together and listen to the orders of the head of the family. Now that their titles were gone, and their whole families were sent away, power, status, and money were all gone. These nobles did not need Sulen to do anything. Sulen did not need to worry about these nobles getting together and causing trouble. Once they arrived at the northern wasteland, according to the management system of the city, these nobles would be quickly digested and absorbed. In addition to these nobles, Sulen also found a lot of fallen ones among these nobles. After receiving the power of evil gods or demons, the negative emotions in their hearts were magnified. Sulen did not even need to do anything. These people would directly jump out and jump out. In the end, they were easily suppressed by the imperial guards and the army. In order to maintain the stability of Harvest City, Phil especially sent over 1,000 soldiers. With Sulen and Chris in charge, these nobles could not do anything. Chapter 5:10. After becoming a legendary succubus, Crazy's strength had increased a lot. Now, when she used charm at full power, even Sulen was shocked. In addition to her original ability, Crazy also mastered the power of fire. This power naturally came from the Balrog. She could add fire to her weapons. Sulen tested the power of these magic flames and found that they were no worse than those of the Balrog. At the same time, she also learned many fire spells. In addition to these, Crazy also awakened the blasphemous language. The blasphemous language was a power that spread among demons. It was the power of the oldest evil god and one of the abilities that the gods of the evil camp were good at. This was the most ancient blasphemous language. Only some powerful and evil beings with divinity could master this ability. Otherwise, they could only master the lower level of the blasphemous language. Not long ago, when Sulen killed the priestess of the Church of the Soul Snatchers, she used the blasphemous language. However, the power of the blasphemous language was limited to Sulen. Sulen resisted it directly. Some priests who were favored by the gods also had this ability, but what they mastered was the word of truth. If one could become the chosen one or the favored one of the gods, they would be able to become the gods' chosen ones. This ability could be upgraded to the holy word. Under normal circumstances, the blasphemous language and the blasphemous language could only be bestowed by a powerful demon or evil god, whether it was a demon, a devil, or an evil god. An evil sacrificial ceremony was required. If it was a demon, it was simple. They could just kill brainlessly, as long as there was enough blood and chaos. Just like Brent, who killed thousands of people to perform the sacrificial ceremony. If it was a devil, then a simple bloody massacre would not satisfy them. They liked all kinds of conspiracies and betrayals, especially those melodramatic dramas where relatives plotted against each other and killed each other. For example, the fight for the inheritance of nobles, the son killed the father, the younger brother killed the elder brother. Conspiracies and betrayals were the devil's favorite. Of course, they could also choose other evil gods. After all, there were still many evil gods in the lower planes. They could be obtained by offering sacrifices to please them. For example, if Chris wanted to obtain this ability, she would have to offer a sacrifice to the succubus queen and please her. As the most dangerous and beautiful bitch in the bottomless abyss, she had mastered the divine concepts of lust, depravity, promiscuity, and so on. The more unreasonable a joyous ritual was, the easier it would be to gain her pleasure and rewards. Simply put, holding a large-scale feast would be enough to gain her rewards. Of course, this was only the most basic level. After all, as the succubus queen, what kind of extravaganza had she not played before? She was known as the biggest chicken coop in the multiverse. Not only did they receive humanoid creatures, but they also received other creatures. This kind of pleasing activity was held every once in a while, and each time, it was more and more excessive. Therefore, in the beginning, they might be able to complete it. However, after a few times, the difficulty would increase. Moreover, this kind of ability bestowed by the evil gods came with a price. Although it could increase their strength, it would also cause them to fall into the control of the evil gods. For example, the glorious nun of the succubus queen. Although these legendary succubi were strong, they were basically completely controlled by the succubus queen and could not resist at all. The blasphemy language that Chris obtained was different. She obtained it by absorbing the power of the Baler. It was equivalent to awakening on her own and was not restricted by other evil gods at all. She could now be said to have escaped the control of the succubus queen. She had also obtained divinity now. If she could absorb all the divinity of the Baler, her power would become even stronger. The divinity of the Baler was the power of slaughter, destruction, and chaos. It was not easy for Chris to fully master it. After all, the succubus was better at lust, depravity, and promiscuity. For a long time, Chris's strength would continue to grow until she completely integrated the divinity of the Baler. Sulen only gained experience and a gold treasure chest in this battle. He opened the gold treasure chest and heard the familiar prompt of the system. Congratulations, you have obtained the item Magic Gem X3. 3 high-quality magic gems were worth about 30,000 kinnar. For this kind of spellcasting material, Sulen did not mind too much. These things had always been used in battles and experiments. All kinds of magic gems produced in the underground world were basically stored in the wizard tower for their use. While Sulen was investigating the nobles in Harvest City, the old city renovation plan was also in progress. The former slums were completely flattened. After the land was flattened, they began to build according to the design that had been prepared long ago. The first thing to be built was still the housing. The housing style was uniform. All of them were 3-story buildings. This kind of house was not difficult to build and saved the land. At the same time, the first floor of the house could be used as a shop. In addition to the houses, Sulen also asked to build a prison and a college. He was going to build a college in Harvest City to train more grassroots officials. The teachers in the college were selected by Sulen from the nobles who were about to be exiled. These people needed to go through ideological and political education before they could become teachers. After everything else was on track, Sulen's investigation of the nobles became faster and faster. This time, about half of the nobles in Harvest City would be stripped of their titles and confiscated of their land. Not to mention other things, just the land was enough to make people speechless. 80% of the farmland around Harvest City belonged to the nobles. This time, the confiscated land took up more than 30% of the total land in Harvest City. Sulen did not plan to keep this much land. He planned to use some of it as salary. For the poor, if they had to choose between money and land, they would usually choose land. Very few people would choose money. After Sulen announced that the compensation for this work would be land, no matter if it was the refugees or the poor, they all worked hard. Even the commoners in Harvest City were jealous of Sulen's practice of using farmland as compensation. The farmland confiscated from the nobles were all good farmland. The land was fertile, and there was plenty of water around. Basically, there would be a bumper harvest every year. This kind of farmland used to be monopolized by the nobles. Now that it was being used as compensation, the refugees and the poor all wanted to get their hands on it. In this era, there was still a big difference between good farmland and normal farmland. Farmland that was close to a water source was good farmland. On the other hand, farmland that lacked water source was poor farmland. After all, there was no pump in this world that could pump water to irrigate farmland. A group of priests under the protection of 2 groups of knights came to a desolate land. Sulen looked at the land. The surrounding land was more or less green, but the land here was yellow. There was not a single plant on the ground. Sulen grabbed a handful of soil, and the yellow sand slipped through his fingers. It was obvious that the land here had been severely damaged. This was the trace left behind by the Baler. Sulen threw down the sand and said, "Mr. Michel, I'll leave this place to you. Don't worry, Your Majesty. I will definitely restore this place to its original state. Pastor Mr. promised. Pastor Mr. was the bishop of the Nature Church in Harvest City. His position was second only to the Archbishop of San Felto City. After discussing the details with Su Len, he began to restore the land. Bishop Michel and a few other priests began to pray. Soon, a powerful force of nature descended from the sky. With the appearance of this force of nature, the evil energy on the originally deserted land was dispelled. The land also changed from desertification to soil. Green grass grew out of the soil. Soon, this desolate and withered land became fertile farmland. Su Len looked at the land and said in surprise, "The Nature Church's force of nature is indeed powerful. It can make deserted land fertile again." Michel shook his head and said, "Using divine power to change the natural environment is not the best way. I can turn this place into a desert mainly because the damage to the farmland here is not serious. As long as the residual power of the Baler is removed, it can be restored with magic. But if it is a naturally formed desert, it will be very difficult to restore it with this method. The restoration effect is only temporary. Once the divine power dissipates and the surrounding environment does not change, this land will quickly become a desert again." Michel shook his head and said, "Many big druids have been working hard to restore the damage caused by the ancient war. In ancient times, the Arcane Kingdom and the Gods of Order broke out in a war that affected dozens of planes. Some planes even became barren and dead because of this war. Sullen's plane was also seriously damaged. Just like the Sea of Death in the center of the continent, it spread for thousands of miles and there was almost no life. Because of the war, the magic in that area was chaotic. All kinds of sandstorms and tornadoes often appeared. There were even many dangerous mutant creatures. The goddess of nature and the big druids had been trying to restore the damage on the land and restore vitality. However, the effect was very poor. After thousands of years, they had only shrunk the desert of death a little. Of course, with the efforts of the druids and the goddess of nature, some small oases had appeared in the Sea of Death. These oases were scattered in the Sea of Death, forming a trade route that ran through the Sea of Death. Of course, this trade route did not go deep into the Sea of Death. It was said that there were many ancient ruins buried in the Sea of Death. There were immeasurable wealth and methods to make people stronger. Every year, a large number of adventurers risked their lives to go to the Sea of Death. Chapter 5:11. The Church of the Goddess of Nature hated those who destroyed the balance of nature. Many wizards' experiments would cause some damage to the natural environment, so the relationship between the Temple of Nature and the wizards had always been bad. The druids in the Church of Nature also had many different schools. For example, the druids of the School of Balance cared about the balance between other creatures and nature. These druids would carefully maintain the balance of nature so that it would not be broken. If a kind of animal or plant became a disaster and posed a great threat to other species, they would eliminate it, regardless of whether it was good or evil. The druids of this school were stubborn and had their own principles. They were difficult to communicate with and hated wizards the most. They had a theory called the balance of the biological world. They even believed that if the human population was too large, it would affect the balance of nature. If it was not limited, it would lead to serious consequences. The solution was to limit the population. It was said that they also used many methods to limit the population, including war, disease, starvation, and so on. If it was not for the fact that there were no Thanos gloves in this world, Su Len doubted that they would make one. With a snap of the finger, the problem was solved reasonably, fairly, and quickly. These druids of the School of Balance were absolutely neutral, so their actions were incomprehensible to others. The wild druids worshipped nature, but they paid more attention to animals. The druids of this school were proficient in transformation and could transform into various animals. The most basic druids could transform into werewolves. The more powerful ones could transform into giant bears, petrifying lizards, pterosaurs, and so on. As the name suggested, the Guardian School was proficient in protection spells. There was also the School of Nature. The druids of this school were the most respected. They were also the ones who repaired the damage of nature for decades. At the same time, the druids of this school could summon the spirits of nature. The spirits of nature would help them in battle. The druids of this school were also proficient in potions and identifying herbs. The school of nature had the power of druids second only to the druid order. The race with the highest percentage of druids was half-elves. Of course, it used to be elves, but after the elves returned to the elf forest, it was rare to see elven druids. Other races could also give birth to druids. It was said that there were even drows who joined the druid order. Regarding this special situation, one should not be too surprised. After all, in every race, there would always be a few people who did not belong to the majority. For example, the succubus paladins, the drows who believed in the Dark Maiden, the Death Knights who believed in the Lord of Dawn, and so on. The demon paladins were also known as the Children of Hell. To put it simply, they were a group of people who lived in the darkness but yearned for the light. A group of people who yearned for salvation. Born in the evil lower planes, they yearned for redemption and return to the light, but their fates were often very tragic. Very few gods would accept these demons. The upper planes would not accept them, and the lower planes would view them as traitors. The children of hell rarely survived. Most of the children of hell fell back into the darkness, or died rather miserably. Some of the luckier ones turned to the neutral camp and finally lived a life that was neither good nor bad, but was rather bumpy. Out of 100 awakened children of hell, only one would survive. Su Len remembered a succubus who fell in love with an angel and decided to become a saint samurai. He had to admit that this was a great mockery to the succubus queen. A succubus who controlled lust actually fell in love with an angel. There was also such a person among the drows. Chui Haizi, also known as Chui San, was born in a family of drows who believed in the Queen of Spiders. After betraying the Queen of Spiders, it was incredible that he could still live well. Su Len did not have any opinions about these druids, and wizards should indeed protect the environment for magic experiments. Those harmful experiments must be carried out in an absolutely isolated area. Pollution leaks, which directly caused the surrounding dozens of kilometers to become uninhabitable, were absolutely forbidden. After all, the material world was the foundation of human life. If there was pollution everywhere, how could ordinary people survive? Without ordinary people as the foundation, no matter how powerful a sect was, it would decline. After all, only with a sufficient population base could it provide all kinds of resources and talents. However, there were always some sorcerer organizations that didn't understand this logic. Among them, the dark sorcerer organizations were the most prominent. However, the dark sorcerer organizations had gradually been eliminated by other sorcerers. Now, the dark sorcerer organizations were basically getting weaker and weaker. Su Luan stayed in Harvest City for a month, and the most important thing he did was to check on the nobles. After spending a month, all the nobles with problems were cleaned out. Su Luan only emptied the treasury of these nobles. It had to be said that these nobles were worthy of being called the accumulation of tens of generations, hundreds of years, or even thousands of years. Each and every one of them was filthy rich. All kinds of gold coins and gems were piled up like mountains. There were also manors, castles, shops, mines, workshops, and so on. If all of them were converted, it would be tens of millions of kinnar. In addition to these assets, Su Len also found a lot of precious magic materials, many of which even Su Len did not have. He had to admit that these southern nobles were really rich. It made him want to rob the rest of the nobles as well. But fortunately, he didn't lose his mind. Even so, the remaining nobles were all frightened and treading on thin ice. During this time, they couldn't be more obedient, so Su Luan couldn't find an excuse to attack them. For this reason, he regretted for a long time. Su Lan did not directly sell the manors, shops, mines, and workshops that he confiscated. If he sold so many assets in a short period of time, it would cause the price to drop. If that happened, he would be the one to lose. Those merchants would not buy at a high price just because he was the king. Su Lan kept the best manors and castles, and gave the rest to the nobles as rewards. Su Lan also kept the best shops and gave them to the caravans in North Town. Su Lan gave the rest of the shops to the Imperial Secret Service. The Imperial Secret Service's intelligence network was too expensive. Su Lan allowed the Imperial Secret Service to set up a stronghold and set up shops to raise funds. The advantage of doing this was that they could hide themselves better. At the same time, they would have more channels to gather information. A part of the profits from these shops would be given to the Imperial Secret Service as subsidies, and the rest would be stored in the stronghold. At the same time, Su Lan also left some shops for the local town hall. These shops were for the town hall to set up some daily necessities shops to stabilize the price of goods. This way, the price of goods would not be controlled by those profiteers. Su Lan had been in Harvest City for a month now, so he knew a lot about the city. In the past, the nobles and merchants here would often work together to lower the price of food during the harvest season. Then, when there was a shortage of food, they would raise the price. In this way, ordinary civilians would have their flesh cut off twice. If they were even more unscrupulous, items such as salt and cloth would be cut off once more. Therefore, although this city was called Harvest City, the commoners' lives were not good. It was not uncommon for the farmers to suffer when there was a good harvest. Of course, Su Lan would not let those profiteers get away with it. Therefore, he planned to let the town hall come out and give them the lowest price for food. At the same time, he would set up a granary here to store food and sell it at a low price during the shortage of food. Su Lan learned this from his previous life. In his previous life, there was a system like this in ancient times. Chongping Granary was specifically built for this purpose. However, no matter how good the system was, it still needed people to follow the rules. Unfortunately, there were not many people who could do it. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many fire dragons burning granaries and ghost soldiers borrowing food. Even in his previous life, when modern information was so perfect, there were still people who took risks out of desperation. Su Lan naturally did not trust the integrity of the officials. Therefore, he ordered all the officials to go to the prison every 6 months for ideological and political studies. At the same time, Su Lan also ordered the imperial guards to supervise them. In order to make this system work properly, Su Lan put in a lot of effort. Harvest City was the first southern city that Su Lan renovated. It could be said that it was a benchmark, so he had to do it to the best of his ability. In addition to these, the mines that were confiscated from the nobles would be returned to the royal family. There were many types of mines, and many of them would produce some magic materials. Some of them would be sent to the northern city, and the rest would be sold to the royal family. Chris, Hathaway, Alex, Phyllis, Karina, and his half-elf maid would all have a share. As for the workshops, Su Lan was going to sell them to the merchants. If these workshops were handed over to the town hall, the output and expenditure would not be proportional. The town hall would also become bloated, so it was better to hand them over to the merchants. Of course, they would have to abide by the laws of the Kingdom of Florence and pay taxes according to the rules. In the past, these workshops were in the hands of the nobles, and those nobles had never paid taxes. Since Su Lan ascended to the throne, he had arranged people to perfect the legal system of the Kingdom of Florence. Before this, the Kingdom of Florence did not have a perfect set of laws. A lot of times, it depended on the preferences of the nobles. Of course, this state was not good. A proper set of laws would make it easier to govern the country. This time, Sulan had obtained a lot of wealth in Harvest City, but it would take a while before he could cash it all out. He directly took away about 8 million kinnar, and there were still about 1 million kinnar left. Sulan handed these over to the Imperial Guard in Harvest City. The Imperial Guard stronghold in Harvest City had been upgraded by Sulan, and the money would be used to build the strongholds of the Imperial Guard in other southern cities. Sulan and Chris left Harvest City together. After his investigation, Harvest City was completely under his control. All the things that needed to be done were arranged. The rest of the officials only needed to follow Sulan's plan and build the stronghold. Chapter 5:12 North City, Royal Palace. When the morning sun shone into the room, Sulan woke up from his sleep and carefully moved the arms and legs around him away. Sulan got out of bed quietly. Last night, to celebrate Sulan's return and Crazy's advancement to legendary, Sulan, Crazy, Hathaway, Alex, Phyllis, Xanthi, and Karina, as well as 2 half-elf maids, held a celebration ceremony. Last night, Sulan's thunder and lightning spear was like a dragon, killing Crazy and making her throw away her armor. For the first time, he achieved 8 consecutive kills. But even so, he was still too short of the legendary 10 women in a night. He didn't know when the author, that single dog, would make up for it. Sigh. This time, Sulan brought back kinnar, but he hadn't sent it to the treasury yet. He planned to send it there later and take a look at his mount, the little female dragon. Speaking of which, ever since he tamed the little female dragon, Sulan hadn't ridden her even once. This mount was simply too incompetent. After a simple breakfast, Sulan walked directly to the Wizard Tower. At this time, the Wizard Tower was much more crowded than before. The apprentices of the Northwind Academy were also in the Wizard Tower for classes. The Northwind Academy was still under construction. Sulan walked through the hall and arrived at the treasury of the Northwind Tower. The treasury of the Northwind Tower was heavily guarded. Not only was there the tower spirit, Milky Way, guarding it, but there were also 2 steel golems. There were also obsidian golems standing in the corridor. Every 10 meters or so, there were 2 obsidian golems. These obsidian golems were actually obsidian golems. If anything happened, these obsidian golems would wake up immediately. Soon, Sulan arrived at the door of the treasury. Milky Way, open the door of the treasury. Sulan shouted. Milky Way received. Confirming permission. Permission granted. A beam of spiritual light swept over Sulan's body. This spiritual light could detect Sulan's body shape, appearance, bones, and pupils. The door would only open after everyone had passed. In fact, this method of detection was not perfect. The tower spirit in the secret realm used a more powerful soul detection, which could detect a person's soul fluctuations. After all, there were ways to change one's appearance and bones, but not soul fluctuations. Everyone's soul was different, and everyone had completely different soul fluctuations. This kind of detection method couldn't be faked, and it was very safe. The Northwind Tower hadn't installed this technology yet. After all, it wasn't easy to detect one's soul. Hathaway was already researching this problem. Permission granted. Opening the door to the treasury. Please wait a moment. Soon, a wave of energy rippled out, and the heavy door of the treasury slowly opened. The dazzling golden light flickered, and the light reflected by the large amount of gold blinded Sulan for a moment. After quickly regaining his vision, he saw the pile of gold that looked like a small mountain, and on the mountain of gold, there was a ferocious-looking, dark red beast sleeping soundly. Sulan walked into the treasury, and the red dragon on Ixvia's nose subconsciously sniffed. As if it was a familiar smell, the red dragon on Ixvia didn't wake up. She was still sleeping soundly, and there was even a trace of sparkling liquid at the corner of her mouth. Sulan looked at the little female dragon expressionlessly, and went directly to the other side of the treasury. He opened the storage space and cleared out all the gold inside. Sullen's series of actions didn't wake the little female dragon. This red dragon was sleeping soundly on a large pile of gold, and seemed to have sensed some movement. Her body subconsciously grabbed the gold with her claws, and at the same time, she muttered to herself, "Mine, this gold is all mine, and that's Sulan, just you wait. When I become an adult, I will hang you up and whip you every day." He. The little female dragon seemed to have dreamt something that made her excited, and she laughed out loud in her dream. Sullen's mouth couldn't help but twitch after hearing this. It seemed that he had been too relaxed with her recently, and she finally spoke her mind in her dream. "Humph." Sulan sneered. His body flashed, and a trace of coldness appeared in the surrounding air. In the next second, countless ice fog appeared, and before the little female dragon Onyxvia could react, her entire head was frozen. Bang! "Who is it? How dare you sneak attack the great lava king and disturb my beautiful dream? I'm going to." The moment the crimson dragon was frozen, she immediately woke up. After a shiver, she broke the ice in an instant. The crimson dragon, who was disturbed from her beautiful dream, roared angrily and wanted to teach the guy who dared to sneak attack her a lesson. But after seeing Su Luan standing in front of her, her anger disappeared in an instant, and her roaring throat seemed to be stuck at this moment. "Speak, continue speaking. What are you going to do to me?" Sulan said expressionlessly, his cold eyes sweeping across the red dragon's body. "I will lift you up and spread your wings to fly." The red dragon Onyxvia quickly said, trying to please him. Her mountain-like body also crouched down, looking very obedient. Her expression seemed to be saying, "I am a good baby." "Is that so? Then who was it that said to hang you up and whip you?" Sulan glanced at her and said. Hearing Sullen's words, the red dragon Onyxvia broke out in cold sweat. How did her master know the scene in her dream? Was he so powerful that he could peek into other people's dreams? The red dragon didn't have time to think. She immediately said loudly, "Who is it? How dare you be so unreasonable? Master, tell me who it is, and I will capture him immediately for you to punish." The red dragon said righteously. If it weren't for the obvious red dragon characteristics on her body, Sulan would have thought that she was a gold dragon. Speaking of which, Su Luan also liked gold royals very much. His whole body was shining with gold, which was the standard of a nouveau riche. Sulan sized up the red dragon in front of him. How long had it been? She had actually learned to lie through her teeth, to keep a low profile, and to follow her heart. This was unbelievable. Red dragons were arrogant by nature and didn't know how to be humble at all. They were all like iron-headed dolls. Now, this little female dragon was enlightened. If she was given enough time to grow, she might also become a famous evil dragon in the multiverse. According to the relevant data and statistics, the red dragons and white dragons had the highest rate of premature death in the multiverse. The white dragons died because of their strength, while the red dragons died because of their arrogance. When they didn't have the strength to roam around, they would rob in a high-profile manner. Those adventurers liked this kind of dragon the most. As long as they were careful, they could get the title of a dragon slayer. Why not? Don't pretend. I'm talking about you. Su Luan said coldly. Just now, you said everything in your heart in your dream. Impossible. I want the dragon mother Tiamat to swear that I definitely didn't say anything, the little female dragon said immediately. Humph, Sulan didn't say anything. To be honest, the dragon's belief in Tiamat was basically just words. Some dragons didn't even bother to mention it verbally. One could imagine how credible this oath was. Also, I've been here for half a day and you've been sleeping. Is this how you guard my treasure? Sulan deliberately emphasized the word me. That. The little female dragon was a little hesitant. I'm almost an adult now. I'll be a little sleepy during this period. Also, Master, didn't you say that my original wealth still belongs to me? You remember this very clearly. Su Len said with a cold smile. During the time you were guarding the treasure, a lot of gold was lost. As the guard of the treasure, you didn't fulfill your duty, so your gold was confiscated. Ah! The little female dragon's body instantly straightened up. Master, you can't do this. That's the wealth I've painstakingly accumulated for decades. You're bullying a dragon. That voice was miserable and mournful. It was as if one would cry when one heard it. However, Su Len didn't have any reaction at all. Are you done crying? Are you done? After crying for a while and seeing that Su Len didn't have any reaction, the little female dragon finally stopped her performance. Then let's go. Su Len said and was about to turn and leave. With a flash of light, the little red dragon's huge body disappeared, and a beautiful girl with red hair and an enchanting figure appeared in front of him. Master, where are we going? Didn't you say you were going to carry me and spread your wings and fly high? Su Len looked back at her and said, I'll give you a chance to show off. Onyx Via hung her head and followed Su Len out of the treasure trove dejectedly. When she thought of her gold being gone, the little female dragon couldn't wait to spit out a mouthful of dragon's breath. However, when she thought of the difference in strength between the two sides, she could only stare weakly at Su Len. That expression made her look like a punching bag. Then Su Len let the little female dragon take him to the sky. The red dragon's huge body was very conspicuous. Although she wasn't an adult yet, as the largest red dragon among the 5 color dragons, she was now 14 meters long. When she spread her wings, she covered the sky and the sun. Su Len rode on the little female dragon's back and flew quickly in the sky. There was a burst of cheers in North Town City below. In their eyes, their lord had become a legendary dragon knight. With such a powerful lord protecting them, these people felt deeply honored. Giant dragons were indeed a very strong deterrent in this era. There were too few ways for humans to deal with giant dragons. After flying for a while on the little red dragon, Su Len also discovered that the ballista's power was really limited against giant dragons. Using a ballista to attack a giant dragon was like using a rifle to attack an airplane. The success rate was too low. Moreover, compared to an airplane, giant dragons were more than one level more agile. Weapons like the ballista could only hit pterosaurs or other Euron. For real giant dragons, the threat was very limited. Chapter 5:13. Su Len rode on the little female dragon and flew around in the sky. Then, he brought her back to the palace and taught her a lesson. This red dragon was a troublemaker, so she needed to be taught a lesson every once in a while. Su Len was happy to see the little red dragon make mistakes. Because as long as this was the case, he would have a legitimate reason to train and teach the little red dragon. After all, as an upright king, how could he train and teach a red dragon without making any mistakes and without any reason? Teaching a giant dragon was a very interesting thing. The northern city had been accepting people. Su Len sent many nobles to the North Wind Kingdom. After a period of training, these nobles began to enrich the North Wind Kingdom. Unlike the Kingdom of Florence, the northern city was completely built by Su Len. He had absolute control. These nobles could not do anything here. They could only contribute to the construction of the North Wind Principality. However, for these nobles, working for the North Wind Principality was a very good way out. These people were sent here and lost all their wealth. Many of them did not have any skills. If the northern city did not train them, at least half of these nobles would have starved to death. North Wind Tower, Hathaway's laboratory. Su Len was doing a simulation experiment with Hathaway. With a flash of light, Su Len took off his magic glasses. This time, it looks good. It should be a success. I don't know. Let's test it first, Hathaway said as she moved her body. As she spoke, Hathaway picked up the crystal on the experiment table and began to test it. The machine used for testing was very large. After Hathaway put the crystal in, she turned it on. A powerful energy wave came. Then, the machine started up. An irritating sound was heard. The machine was like a train. It was very noisy. Finally, after 5 minutes, the machine stopped. Hathaway turned on the machine. The crystal, which was originally bright and clear, had become damaged. It was full of cracks. It seemed that the crystal would shatter completely with a gentle touch. Looks like the experiment didn't succeed, Sulen said as he glanced at the crystal. Hathaway shook her head and said, "We've made great progress in this experiment. The hardness and magic resistance of this crystal have already reached 80% of the data we needed. As long as we continue our research, I believe we will be able to obtain the crystal we want very soon." "All right. You've indeed improved." Sulen checked the crystal and said. Although the crystal looked cracked, Sulen looked at it carefully and found that it was still very hard. Sulen and Hathaway were experimenting with the creation of arcane crystals. These crystals were hard, tough, and had high magic resistance. They were the main materials used to create diamond golems. The diamond golem was a legendary golem. Sulen and Hathaway had been trying to craft it for a long time. Northwind Tower didn't have all the information on the diamond golem, so they could only research it bit by bit. Although it was called a diamond golem, this legendary golem wasn't made of diamond. It was just that this material looked like diamond and had the hardness of diamond. In fact, this golem used a kind of arcane crystal. Although diamond was hard, it wasn't suitable for making golems. This material had very low toughness. Although it was hard, it was easy to shatter after being hit by other hard objects. Moreover, diamond wasn't resistant to high temperatures. After the temperature reached thousands of degrees Celsius, it would melt, so it wasn't suitable for making golems. Although diamond was produced in large quantities, it had no advantage over crystal. Hathaway's requirements for the arcane crystal were very high. The arcanists had long mastered the craft of artificial crystals. Even artificial diamonds were the same. However, the magic affinity of artificial diamonds was quite different from natural diamonds. After dozens of adjustments, this artificial arcane crystal was close to being used to make diamond golems. The arcane crystal required for diamond golems had to have a molar hardness of at least level 8. At the same time, the requirements for magic resistance were very high. If the required arcane crystal was successfully produced, then the work of building the diamond golem would be almost half done. Sulen was still looking forward to having these diamond golems in his golem army. Only with diamond golems could the golem army participate in battles above the legendary level. The golem army in the floating city was based on a steel golem, mixed with some diamond golems, mithril golems, adamantine golems, arcane guardian golems, and spellbreaker golems. Even the demon army of the bottomless abyss couldn't resist this level of golem army. This was also the powerful force that the great arcanists used to colonize many planes. Afternoon. Alex returned to the Wizard Tower with good news. Some of the workshops in Harvest City in the south had been sold, and the supplies needed by the Northwind Duchy were also being delivered. The Northwind Duchy caravan was in charge of the transportation, led by Xian. The Northwind Duchy caravan was now several times stronger than before. With Sullen's support, Xian's caravan had a large number of soldiers from the Northwind Duchy. These soldiers were very powerful. Even the local nobles' armies were no match for them, let alone bandits. If this caravan turned into bandits, they could easily plunder a large number of nobles' territories. Now, this caravan was in charge of a part of the Northwind Duchy's foreign trade. Many of the Northwind Duchy's products were transported to the south by them. Su Len was even now considering whether to continue to contact the south and trade with the Anza kingdom. These kingdoms were more prosperous than Florence. These southern countries were close to the sea and had prosperous maritime trade. Although the Red Dragon Queen had cut them off, they were still very rich. If Su Len wanted to build a floating city, he would need hundreds of billions of kinnar. If he didn't plunder these countries, how could he build a floating city? What about the cultists? Su Len asked as he sat in front of his desk. Alex sat on the sofa next to him and ate some snacks. As his power and territory continued to expand, so did the number of things he had to deal with. Su Len didn't want to be tied up in the study every day, so he would leave some things to his women. Alex now had some information and caravans. He was also tracking down the cultists in the Florence Duchy and the Northwind Duchy. After swallowing the biscuit, Alex picked up the honey fruit tea next to him and took a sip. Ever since the Church of the Soul Snatchers was taken care of, the other cultists have become much more secretive. They still have many spies in the south. These people are just hiding temporarily. When things calm down, they will appear again. Su Len nodded. They really are like dog skin plasters. Send people to keep an eye on the cultists. The Imperial Secret Guards will listen to your orders. Once you find their nest, report it immediately. Currently, there were basically no cultists in the Northwind Duchy. Su Len had too much control over the place, so the cultists couldn't survive at all. However, it was different in Florence. There was too much land for the cultists to survive. Xion's caravans had recruited a large number of mercenaries and adventurers in addition to some soldiers from the Northwind City. Although these people weren't very strong, they could be useful in many situations. According to Su Len, these people were the city's foxes and rats. They were familiar with the various dark sides of the city and the gray areas. They could provide a lot of useful information and combat power for the Kingdom of Florence. Su Len had been promoting the old city renovation plan of the Kingdom of Florence, but the progress was limited. After all, this kind of renovation cost a lot of money and would also damage the power of the nobles. Therefore, the nobles were not very active. Su Len could only push it forward bit by bit. At the same time, the Northwind Duchy and the underground world were operating at full capacity. The Northwind Duchy was also continuing to expand. In the Northwind City, there were now 3 legendary masters. Alex was also getting closer and closer to becoming a legendary master. Su Len gave the remaining divinity to Alex again. With 2 divinity points, her bloodline had become even stronger. Su Len planned to give the remaining 3 divinity points to Hathaway, Karina, and Phyllis. Divinity was very important to them. Mystery Realm, Nature Oak. This area was shrouded in rich life energy and natural energy. Su Len had sealed this area, so the outside world couldn't sense any life energy. This was the forbidden area of the entire Northwind Duchy. Even Alex and the others couldn't enter at will without Sullen's permission. The nature oak here already had its own consciousness. After absorbing the nature crystal, this nature oak had become a divine plant. It even had the possibility of becoming a tree of life or a world tree. Of course, the time and resources needed to become a tree of life or a world tree were extremely shocking. Su Len couldn't afford to raise it now. With such a plant, if he found a lifeless realm in the astral plane, he could use it to transform that realm into one full of life. Of course, it would take a long time to do this. The entire area was shrouded in rich life energy and nature energy. Su Len planned to wait until the tree stabilized and then arrange for some half-elves to come in. The power emitted by this tree could slowly purify and change the bloodline, making the original elven bloodline richer. Now, this tree had grown to more than 30 meters. It was considered a big tree outside, but it was just the beginning in the nature oak. Chapter 5:14. As for this nature oak, Su Luan intended to wait until he grew up to arrange for a few well-behaved half-elves to live here for a period of time, or treat living here for a period of time as a reward. If the half-elves knew there was a nature oak in the hidden realm, they would be willing to pay any price. With the nature oak, the half-elves would be more loyal to the Duchy of North Wind. Of course, before Su Luan was strong enough, he wouldn't expose the nature oak. It must be known that the nature oak had already begun to evolve. If it were to successfully evolve into an ancient tree, it would produce moon spring water every once in a while. The spring water contained a certain amount of mana that could recover mana and some simple injuries. At the same time, it could be used to make potions. If it could evolve into a tree of life, it would produce a miraculous item like the Fountain of Youth. It could even produce treasures like the Fountain of Life. Of course, it was still very difficult to obtain something like the Fountain of Life. However, for Su Len, who was already a demigod, the greatest effect of the Fountain of Life was no longer useful to him. The Fountain of Life could increase one's lifespan by 1,000 years without any side effects. As long as Su Len didn't do anything stupid, he could easily live for a few thousand years. Of course, the Fountain of Life had other effects, such as healing injuries, regrowing broken limbs, healing fatal injuries, strengthening vitality, and eternal youth. Approximately 1 milliliter of water of life could restore 10 HP, which was equivalent to healing a minor injury. This effect was only effective on living creatures. The effect of limb regrowth required more water of life, about 100 milliliters. As for healing fatal injuries, it also required at least 100 milliliters. If one wanted to use the Fountain of Life to increase vitality, they would need to drink more than 1 liter of Fountain of Life each time. Each time, it would permanently increase vitality by 1 point, and at the same time, it would give them the ability to regenerate. The upper limit of vitality increase is 50 points. This effect can be triggered 10 times. The amount of Fountain of Life consumed will increase each time. Of course, not many people had the luxury to do so. As for eternal youth and life extension, drinking 1 liter of Fountain of Life could achieve this effect. It wasn't easy to obtain the Fountain of Life. At least for now, this nature oak was still very far away. After checking that it was growing normally, Su Len let the tower spirit continue to supply energy to seal the place again and left. Su Len woke up in his palace, which was more than 500 square meters. A new day had begun. Su Len had been reading Hathaway's research materials during this period. He was learning about puzzle solving. The Enigma lock technique required the cooperation of many people. It was a very important magic rune. In order to weave a puzzle, one had to be at least at the legendary level. Su Len was not a legendary wizard yet. Fortunately, he was an advanced legendary warrior and had mastered the Field of Thunder, so he could perform some simple operations. As for the little succubus Chrissy, because she was a sorcerer, her role was also limited, but some preliminary preparations still needed to be done. Bang! The door of the study was suddenly pushed open. The mahogany door that was hand-carved by a top-notch master in Northern Town heavily hit the wall and bounced back a little. "What's wrong?" Su Len asked when he saw Hathaway rushing in. "The arcane crystal experiment has reached a critical stage, but some materials are not enough." "I need them," Hathaway said in a hurry. "There's money in the treasury. You can just ask someone to buy them?" Su Len asked in confusion. "I already asked someone to buy them, but these materials are all produced in the astral plane. It's very difficult to buy them." "I want to go to the astral plane and collect some," Hathaway said. "The astral plane?" Sullen's eyes lit up. "Yes. The astral plane is very dangerous. I want you to come with me," Chrissy said without noticing Sullen's expression. "Sure. I've never been to the astral plane before. Let's go." Su Len put down his notes and quickly sat up from his chair. The two went to the wizard tower. The astral plane was a very dangerous place. Wizards would not risk their lives there before they were fully prepared. The astral plane was connected to all the other planes. It had almost endless space, and there were many creatures living in it. Many powerful beings who could not enter the material plane lived in the astral plane, such as the evil gods. There was no air in the astral plane, so it was not easy for all flesh and blood to survive. They had to rely on the half-planes floating in the astral plane. Most of the time, those who traveled in the astral plane were the projections of their souls in energy form, or powerful beings like demigods and saints. Over the years, countless people had entered the astral plane, and countless people had died there. In the end, the astral plane became a huge garbage dump. Of course, there were a lot of treasures in this garbage dump. If you were lucky, you could even find the bodies of ancient gods, hidden half-planes, the capitals of fallen gods, broken floating cities, interstellar battleships, and so on. Hathaway came to the astrology platform. It was not easy to enter the astral plane. There was a protective layer around the main material plane. Wizards called it the earth membrane. This earth membrane was actually a manifestation of the plane's will. It prevented powerful creatures from entering the main material plane, but at the same time, it was not easy for people to leave, but it was much easier than entering. A rune circle was quickly set up on the astrology platform. Sulen and Hathaway did not plan to go to the astral plane with their physical bodies. They planned to use their soul projections. In fact, there were many ways for wizards to travel to the astral plane. Other than soul projection, some wizards also liked to use cloning to create clones. Some wizards would create powerful golem puppets and let a part of their soul control the golem puppets to enter the astral plane. Sulen and Hathaway planned to use soul projections to enter the astral plane this time. After the rune circle was set up, Hathaway and Sulen stood in the middle of the rune circle. Milky Way opened the energy channel, and light blue elemental energy rushed out. Soul projection. Astral gate. Powerful magical energy gathered, and a door emitting a strange light appeared in the middle of the rune circle. Then, a soul projection appeared in front of them. Sulen felt his body suddenly become light, and then he saw a familiar body. It was his body, and the body next to it was Hathaway's. It was a strange feeling to see your own soul projection. After inspecting his own body, Sulen did the same. A soul flashing with a light golden brilliance appeared in front of him. There were flashes of lightning in the soul projection, and at the same time, there was a soul fluctuation that made people's hearts palpitate. Hathaway's soul projection was not as powerful as Sulen's, but it was still extraordinary. A large number of runes could be seen flashing on her soul projection. After a while, the two directly entered the astral gate that was already opened. A dazzling light flashed, and the two soul projections instantly turned into a ray of light and rushed into the sky. The feeling of the soul leaving the body was very strange. It was like removing a sandbag from the body, and the whole body suddenly became light. This was the first time Sulen's soul projection left his body. The whole soul projection was so light that it seemed like it could be blown away by a gust of wind. This was not Sulen's complete soul. It was only a part of his soul. After being shaped into a soul projection by a spell, it went through the astral gate and went to the astral world. The soul projection was not the whole soul. It was only a small part of the soul. If the soul projection died in the astral world, it would not cause the body to die together with it. Instead, it would cause some damage to the soul, and the consequences would be a splitting headache, a trance, and a serious impact on the intelligence. Of course, if the soul was slightly damaged, it would recover after a while. However, if the soul was severely damaged, it would need a priest to cast an advanced repair spell. Of course, it could also be done by a wizard, but the wizard would need to use soul crystals to do so. The soul projection was only a part of the soul, so the strength of the soul projection would be lower than before. There was also another reason. The soul projection could not bring the original equipment, unless the item was a legendary creation. Then, the soul projection could use a spell to shape a projection and let the soul projection use it. Sullen's soul projection inherited about 70% of his strength. This was mainly because Sullen's body was too strong. Hathaway's soul projection inherited about 90% of his strength. After going through the astral gate, a feeling like a fish in water was transmitted from the body. The abundant energy in the astral world entered the body. The concentration of various kinds of energy in the astral world was far higher than in the material plane. The contact between the soul and the energy was deeper. There were many spells that did not need to be chanted and could be cast instantly. Even the casting time of legendary spells was reduced by half. Sulen and Hathaway held hands tightly. It was the first time they came to the astral world. In the past, they had only seen descriptions of the astral world in books. Since it was their first time here, the two of them were very curious. At this time, there was a huge plain under their feet. It was the world they were in. Countless stars were shining in the distance. They could see a large amount of dark matter and the silver dust of the astral world. The two of them were at the edge of the planet. The most eye-catching thing was the two moons above their heads. What was it like to see the moon in the astral world? Sulen could tell you that it was big, very big. One of the two moons was silver, and the other was slightly blue. The two moons were still very far from the planet. It was not easy to go there. Sulen looked at the planet they lived on. He had to admit that the planet was very big. Sulen roughly calculated its diameter. It was half the diameter of the Earth in his previous life. Standing in the astral world, they could clearly see the entire terrain of the planet. Chapter 5:15. From the astral plane, the planet they lived on was very similar to Earth. The north and south poles were also covered in thick layers of ice. The blue ocean occupied most of the planet's surface. This is the world we live in? It looks so beautiful. Hathaway said in surprise. Standing in the astral plane, one could see that there were 9 continents on the planet. The continent Sulen was on was in the northern hemisphere. To the south was a continent. Although it was called a continent, it looked more like a large island. Most of the continent was covered in a layer of green vegetation. To the east of the continent where the kingdom of Florence was, there was another continent across a strait. This continent was bigger than the one Sulen was on. From the northern wasteland to the southeast was the ocean. Through the ocean, one could reach the other continent. In the southern sea of the continent, there were a large number of islands scattered around. There were at least tens of thousands of islands. This was the Southern Sea, the area with the most developed sea trade. To the north of the northern wasteland was an endless glacier. It was a world of ice and snow. To the south was a continent covered in ice and snow. On the other side of the planet, there was also a continent. Below this continent was a slightly smaller continent across a strait. In the southern hemisphere, there were also 4 continents of different sizes. I didn't expect the world we live in to be so big. I wonder what those continents look like. Sulen said with emotion. If there's a chance, I'll travel to those continents. Right, we're here to collect materials. Let's get started. Hathaway interrupted Sulen's imagination. She then pointed at the astral plane. Then let's get started. Sulen nodded. To move in the astral plane, one had to rely on flying spells or teleportation spells. Because there were very few materials in the astral plane, the teleportation distance was very far. With the help of the landmarks in the astral plane, one could teleport tens of millions of kilometers or even more. Because there was no air and gravity, flying spells in the astral plane were very fast. They could easily break through the speed of sound. If they continued to accelerate, they could even reach a few or even a dozen times the speed of sound. After Sulen and Hathaway observed for a while, they quickly found an area rich in materials. There was a lot of dust in the astral plane that was invisible to the naked eye. One of them was astral dust, but it couldn't be seen with the eyes. One could only search for it with spells or other things. Only when the astral dust underwent some changes or was integrated with other energy would ordinary people be able to see it with their naked eyes. After a large amount of astral dust was gathered, it would form a smoke-like golden color. Under normal circumstances, it would be a silver-white dust belt. It was like looking at the Milky Way from afar. Astral sand would emit a faint light. If it was fused with other substances, it would turn into various colors. For example, the silver rings that surrounded the planet due to gravity were more than 70% astral sand. Greater teleportation. Sulen and Hathaway instantly appeared thousands of kilometers away. There was a lot of astral dust around them. Besides astral dust, there were also some other astral substances. Hathaway gently waved her hand. A light flashed, and the surrounding silver substances began to gather in the middle. Hathaway took out a crystal-clear bottle. Then, the silver substances began to gather in the crystal bottle. After seeing Hathaway start to collect materials, Sulen also took out the crystal bottle. A large amount of astral substance was collected in the bottle. The crystal bottle was a space bottle that Hathaway specially made. It had about 10 cubic meters of space inside. Although the astral substance seemed to be a lot, it was actually very small. Soon, all the surrounding silver dust ribbons were collected in the bottle. After collecting the astral substance here, the two continued to collect in another area. There was a lot of astral dust, but it was all scattered in the astral plane. It was very troublesome to collect it. After collecting it, they had to go back and use runic circles to refine and purify it. In the end, they could obtain the silver astral sand. Just as Sulen and Hathaway were collecting astral substance, in the deeper astral plane, a light quickly approached. After a while, Sulen noticed it. "What's that?" Sulen asked, pointing at the rapidly approaching light. "Could be a comet or a half-plane." Hathaway glanced and said, "Maybe if we're lucky, it's a half-plane." Sulen said with a smile. Hathaway rolled her eyes. "Even if we encounter a half-plane, we won't be able to catch it if we're not prepared." Just as the two of them were talking, the beam of light quickly approached them. When it got closer, Sulen finally saw what the light was. It really was a half-plane. It was different from the planet that Sulen and the others lived on. This was a gigantic half-plane. The outer layer was a gray iris that looked like a translucent eggshell. Inside was a complete world. This half-plane didn't have the structure of a planet, but looked more like a continental shelf. This was a half-plane that was born in the astral plane. If no one disturbed it, after decades or even centuries, with the endless energy of the astral plane as a supply, this half-plane would grow land, rocks, mountains, seas, air, plants, and so on. In the end, it would evolve into a half-plane that could support intelligent life. If one was lucky enough, the demi-plane could even grow into a prime material plane. However, the probability was too low. Many demi-planes would slowly die in the process of growth. Some demi-planes would stop growing after reaching a certain size. Only a small number of demi-planes would continue to grow into prime material planes. This gigantic half-plane flew by not far from the two of them. Like a comet, it flew by in front of their eyes and then quickly disappeared from Sulen's sight. However, this half-plane didn't leave nothing behind. It left a large amount of silver dust in its wake. Sulen and Hathaway immediately teleported over and continued to collect there. The space of the astral plane was almost endless. It was an almost infinite space. If you kept going up in the astral plane, you would encounter a layer of crystal wall. Around the crystal wall, you could see countless divine kingdoms. Those divine kingdoms looked like stars from the outside. The projections of these divine kingdoms would also appear in the night sky of the material plane. Of course, only the divine kingdoms of gods with faith in this plane would be projected. If you saw stars falling from the sky in the material plane, it was very likely that a god had fallen. In addition to these, there were also some spacetime storms and spacetime turbulences. Some spacetime turbulences could affect a very large area. Being caught in a spacetime turbulence was equivalent to being attacked by dimensional slash at all times. Even legendary wizards would die if they were caught in it. In the endless time, countless people had died in the astral plane. There were also many people who were lost in the astral plane. Although the astral plane was said to be connected to all the planes, it was too vast. Even if you entered, you might not be able to find the passage to other planes. Without a half-plane, wizard tower, or floating city to rely on, once you were caught in the spacetime turbulence, you would be like an ordinary person being washed away by a flood. Therefore, the level requirement of an astral plane explorer was above level 30, and an astral plane traveler was level 35. As for the top astral plane traveler, the level requirement was level 40. Only the strong of this level could travel in the astral plane. When traveling in the astral plane, one had to be careful of several creatures. The most dangerous one was the evil gods, but these evil gods usually lived in the lower planes and rarely came to the astral plane. Next were the abominations and ancient evil creatures. There were many corpses of gods in the astral world, and many abominations were born from these corpses. They were full of hatred for all life from the moment they were born. They were powerful and very dangerous. Then there were the Githyankis, the indigenous people living in the astral plane. They were a kind of humanoid life. They were aggressive and quite warlike, and there were a lot of them. The chances of encountering evil gods or ancient evil creatures were very low. Most of the monsters were sealed by the ancient gods of order. The Githyankis were born with powerful psionic spells. This race was enslaved by the spirit-sucking monsters a long time ago. The spirit-sucking monsters established a huge empire in the astral plane. However, it was later overthrown by the Githyankis. The Githyankis and the spirit-sucking monsters were mortal enemies. They fought to the death when they met. Now, there were very few spirit-sucking monsters in the astral plane. The Grey Dwarfs had the same experience. Many of the Grey Dwarfs had their minds distorted because of the spirit-sucking monsters' enslavement. However, they eventually gained powerful psionic power and got rid of the spirit-sucking monsters' enslavement. From this point of view, the spirit-sucking monsters could also help their slaves evolve psionic power. It was said that during the Arcane Empire, many arcanists deliberately captured a lot of spirit-sucking monsters to conduct this experiment. The Githyankis had good magic technology. They would build huge astral warships or astral fortresses in the astral plane. This race seemed to have obtained some technology from the Arcane Empire, but the technology they obtained was not perfect. The combat power of those astral fortresses was not as strong as imagined. Sulen quickly collected the astral plane's matter along the silver smoke left by the half-bit wall. The smoke would gradually dissipate over time, so he had to hurry. However, just as Sulen was collecting along the trail, a strong suction came from another place and was constantly absorbing the astral plane's matter. After a while, the surrounding astral plane's matter was swept away. The crystal bottle in Sullen's hand could not compete at all. Seeing this phenomenon, Sullen's figure flashed and was ready to check it out. However, as soon as he turned his head, he saw a whale-like creature smacking its mouth and flying to another silver smoke area. Is this an astral whale? Sulen looked at the behemoth in surprise. Chapter 5:16. In the dark void, specks of starlight twinkled, and in the distance, silvery white smoke was like ribbons, looking magnificent. A huge monster shook its head, and then its huge mouth, which was big enough to swallow a small mountain, quickly sucked the surrounding astral matter into its mouth. In just a few breaths, the surrounding astral matter was all swallowed up. Astral whale. Hathaway looked at the huge monster in the distance and exclaimed, "It seems that our luck is really good. Not only did we encounter a half-bit wall, but we also encountered an astral whale." "Let's go somewhere else," Sulen said, looking at the astral whale in front of him. The astral whale was very big, and its skin was rough and thick, but it was gentle and would not take the initiative to attack. Very few people would attack them because these guys were too big and difficult to kill. It was said that the astral whale was the descendant of Leviathan. Leviathan was a terrifying abomination that lived in the same era as the ancient gods of order. However, with the end of the era of the ancient gods of order, Leviathan also disappeared. Some myths said that Leviathan was killed by the gods, and there were also documents that recorded that it was sealed in a corner of the multiverse. In comparison, Sulen believed in myths more. The myths of this world were not fabricated. Many of the myths recorded things that had happened before. After leaving this area, Sulen and Hathaway continued to collect astral matter until the crystal bottles in their hands were full. They then left the astral world. Hathaway activated the space waymark of the teleportation circle. With a flash of light, she had determined the location of the wizard tower. Bitwall teleportation. With a flash of light, Sulen and Hathaway were enveloped by this flash of light. The next second, the two figures disappeared from the astral world. Northern Wilderness, North Wind Tower, Astrology Platform. A flash of light appeared, and Sulen and Hathaway's souls fell like meteors, flying to their bodies in the wizard tower. For a moment, light and shadow intertwined. When Sulen opened his eyes again, he was already back in the wizard tower. Milky Way, close the energy channel. Hathaway finished casting and the runic array under her feet quickly dimmed. Planar teleportation consumed a lot of mana. If she wanted to explore the astral plane in the future or travel to the astral plane, she would need to establish a stable astral gate. Let's take a look at our harvest this time. After closing the astral gate, Hathaway said with a greedy look. "For you." Sulen smiled and handed the crystal bottle to Hathaway. Many of the following tasks would require the use of astral sand. Hathaway took the crystal bottle and looked at it. "Ah, so many materials. How long will it take to refine them?" "You asked for it." Sulen chuckled. "No, I can't be the only one refining it. I still have a lot of things to do." Hathaway seemed to have thought of something and she shook her head. In any case, the technique required to purify the astral sand isn't too advanced. Let's divide it evenly between everyone. With this astral sand, the arcane crystal can also be used for the final stage of the experiment. In that case, the materials for making the diamond golem are almost complete. We can consider making the diamond golem now. With the diamond golem, the golem legion will be officially established. But the diamond golem technique is still lacking. Whatever, I'll just try a few more times. Hathaway looked at the astral dust in the bottle and couldn't help but smile. Soon, Sulen and Hathaway called Karina, Grace, Alex, Locke, and Andre over and distributed some astral dust for them to refine. After the distribution, Sulen also brought some astral dust to the seclusion room. The astral dust itself was not outstanding in all aspects, but after refining the astral sand, all aspects of its performance would be improved. After the astral sand was integrated with other materials, its hardness and toughness would be greatly improved and it would also have a good magical property. After adding the astral sand, the arcane crystal could almost meet the technical requirements for making the diamond golem. In addition to these, there were many other materials that also required astral sand. For example, some astral sand was added to magical steel during the forging process to finally produce Titan steel. It was very strong in both hardness and magical conductivity, and also had good ductility and high plasticity. It would be an important material for many constructs in the future. Titan steel was a bluish-silver metal that was used in large quantities in the process of making arcane guards and spellbreakers. A crystal bottle contains 10 cubic meters of astral dust. If you want to smelt astral sand with this, you'll need to use elemental fire to refine it. 20 cubic meters of astral dust can be smelted into about 20 kilograms of astral sand, which will be enough for a while. It seems that I'll have to make time to collect astral dust in the future. Sulen and Hathaway did not find any astral sand in the astral plane that had taken shape. The two of them collected the astral dust scattered in the astral plane. This dust contained a lot of impurities, but these impurities were not all useless. They could still be refined into other things, such as astral crystals. This was a kind of dark blue crystal-like thing that had very good magical conductivity and was an important material for making many enchanted constructs. In the laboratory, Sulen opened the elemental channel, activated the runic matrix inside, and summoned the elemental fire. A swaying dark blue flame appeared above the runic matrix. Then, Sulen took out the crystal bottle. With a flash of light, wisps of silver smoke slowly flowed out of the bottle. Under the influence of an invisible force, the smoke and dust quickly came to the elemental fire and burned. The smoke and dust in the crystal bottle flowed out continuously like a trickle. As the elemental fire burned continuously, drops of silver liquid appeared in front of them. With a flash of light, the silver liquid instantly flew to the outside of the runic matrix and condensed into silver particles that were smaller than sesame seeds. This was astral sand. The purification of astral sand was not difficult. What needed to be paid attention to was the temperature of the elemental fire and the smelting time. After 2 days, Sulen finally smelted all the astral dust in his hand into astral sand. Sulen finally weighed it and found that it weighed about 5 kilograms. After giving the refined astral sand to Hathaway, Sulen prepared to go to Sanfilto City. He had been very busy during this time and had not been to Sanfilto City for more than a month. As a king, Sulen was not in the capital for most of the year, which could be said to be very incompetent. During this time, Phyllis was in charge of the work in Florence. When Sulen came here through the teleportation matrix, it was already night time. Phyllis and Sulen had not seen each other for a while. This time, part of the time was to deal with the affairs of the Kingdom of Florence, and the other part was to gradually get to know Phyllis and Sandy. After all, they were newlyweds, and they could not always be separated. Thinking of this, Sulen's heart was burning. After all, when an eel starved to the end, there would always be a abalone. Sulen came to the palace and walked directly to Phyllis's bedroom. Without any delay, Sulen soon arrived at Phyllis's palace. When he entered the palace, Phyllis and Sandy were chatting. Seeing Sulen suddenly come, they were very surprised. When they were about to say something, Sulen had already carried them up. Then, the surrounding maids immediately retreated outside the palace. The entire bedroom was sealed, and no one was allowed to come close. Then, the sound of rain breaking banana leaves came from the palace. Between the valleys, the bottom of the flowers is slippery, and the spring water flows hard under the ice. A poem began to be recited, and Phyllis and Sandy followed along to learn. After the silver vase breaking, the water splashing, and the cavalry charging out, the poem finally came to an end and entered a harmonious state. After cleaning up the battlefield, Sulen asked the maids to bring some food. "Is everything going well in Sanfilto City during this time? Did anything happen?" "Not bad, those nobles are very obedient. The city renovation plan you made has been progressing steadily," Phyllis said while panting. She had the blood of the red dragon, so her physical strength was very good. Among Sulen's women, she was only second to Chris and Alex. "How about Harvest City? Did anything happen during this time?" Sulen asked while chewing the barbecue. Phyllis rolled her eyes and said, "You just killed a lot of people there, and exiled so many nobles. How long has it been? Now those nobles are all as obedient as babies. Why would they dare to cause trouble? Those nobles are all greedy by nature, and they don't want to make progress. They also hindered my reforms, rebelled against the country, and some even joined evil cults. Killing all of them is too easy for them, Su Len said without a care. If those people don't teach them a lesson, they won't know how to behave. It is indeed a bit outrageous. Phyllis had almost recovered. She got up and put on a bathrobe to wash her body in the hot spring. She was sweating all over and felt very uncomfortable. I just sent a batch of new graduates from San Filto Academy to Harvest City. Harvest City is almost on the right track now, Phyllis said as she got up to take a bath. Su Len reached out and took off the towel. Long legs, a slim waist, and a jade bowl in front of her chest. She was very beautiful. Let's take a bath together. No, I can't take a bath with you. Phyllis knew Sullen's personality very well. She didn't even think about it and rejected him. However, she was no match for Su Len. A spear move like a dragon, Overlord spear thrust, followed by 7 snake spear coiling spear. Phyllis's red dragon warlock's flame breath was also blocked. Su Len stretched out his arms and picked up Xanthi, who had not recovered yet. The three of them went to the hot spring nearby to take a bath. The hot spring in the palace was very beautiful. Steam filled the air, making it look like a paradise on earth. You're tuning in to the UnparalleledSwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.